Hey everyone, I'm AfterMOON Horrors. Before we dive into the story, I want to know, where are you watching from, and what time is it for you? It's always fascinating to see listeners tuning in from different places. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy. Story number 1. I didn't plan to take that extra night shift. It was supposed to be my first weekend off in months. I was halfway through reheating leftover pasta when my phone buzzed with a message from our district group chat. Can anyone cover the overnight shift tonight? New guy called in sick. Normally I'd ignore it, but I saw my manager's name attached. Please, Andrea. Just this once. We're short-staffed. She even added, you'll get double pay. Double pay during pandemic hours was no joke. I sighed, shoved the pasta back in the fridge, and texted back. Fine, what's the new guy's name? She replied, Elliot, hired 2 days ago. You'll meet him next week. I remember thinking how strange it was that a new hire already needed coverage. But I'd been there long enough to know that Walmart night shifts weren't for everyone. The Calgary South Point branch had this massive, echoing layout that always felt lonelier at 2 a.m. than any empty street. You'd think the bright aisles would make it better, but under fluorescent light, even the shelves seemed to watch you. I clocked in around 9:55 p.m. The front doors were locked for customers, but the automatic glass still opened for me like a breath, letting in that sterile, recycled air. Only 2 people were supposed to be on overnight duty that night, me and the overnight cleaner, Paul. He was this quiet guy who wore earbuds the entire shift, barely speaking except to say morning when we clocked out. When I went to log into the manager terminal, there was already someone listed under Night Manager Elliot B. I frowned. I messaged Andrea right away. Hey, system says Elliot's already clocked in? She replied, weird. I thought he called off. I'll check payroll tomorrow. Just log in as backup manager. I shrugged it off and got to work checking the freezer temperatures. Around midnight, Paul came up to me while I was restocking the bottled water pallet. He tapped me on the shoulder and pulled out one earbud. Hey, didn't you go home already? I blinked. What? He tilted his head. You walked out like 20 minutes ago. I said bye. I laughed awkwardly. No, I've been right here. Haven't moved from this aisle. He looked genuinely confused, then muttered, guess I need more sleep, and walked off. For the next couple of hours, everything was fine. Normal scanning, restocking, listening to the hum of the refrigerators. But then I started noticing little things that didn't fit. A clipboard with my handwriting on it sitting on the wrong shelf. The office lights flickering, even though I hadn't been there. A pallet of soft drinks moved halfway down the aisle, as if someone had started restocking and just stopped mid-task. I walked over to the CCTV office to check if maybe Paul had done it. The office door was ajar, light spilling through the narrow crack. I pushed it open and froze. Someone was sitting in my chair. My reflection filled the monitor screens, each showing different parts of the store. Only one screen showed movement, a figure wearing the exact same uniform as mine walking past the checkout lanes. I looked down the hallway in real life, empty. I turned back to the monitor. There she was again, pushing a cart toward the exit doors. My throat went dry. I whispered, "What the hell?" But before I could move, the door behind me creaked. Paul's voice startled me. Andrea? Thought you were on your break. I spun around. Paul, look at this. But when I turned back to the monitor, the figure was gone. Every camera showed still aisles again. Paul rubbed his eyes. You okay? You look pale. I told him what I saw, but he chuckled nervously. That's creepy, but maybe the playback lagged. You know the system's old. He didn't sound convinced, but neither was I. I decided to walk the store again, just to clear my head. When I reached the electronics section, I stopped cold. The demo tablets were all turned on, screens glowing. Each showed the same paused video static footage of the self-checkout area. I tapped one screen, and it started playing. I could see myself walking into frame, stacking baskets, then another me entering from the opposite side, wearing my same jacket, same hair tied up, same blue mask. Both versions of me stood side by side. One waved, the other didn't move. Then the video froze again. My heartbeat thudded in my ears. "Who's doing this?" I whispered out loud. I reached for my walkie-talkie. "Paul, are you near electronics?" Static. Then, faintly, his voice came through. "I thought you were." The power flickered. The lights dimmed for maybe half a second, long enough for the silence to become unbearable. When the fluorescence buzzed back on, a cart clattered down the next aisle on its own. I ran over and found it half filled with cleaning supplies, the same kind I'd stocked an hour ago. A folded sheet of paper sat inside. It was one of our shift reports, signed Elliot B. My pulse spiked. Elliot wasn't real, at least not to me. I pulled my phone out and tried calling Andrea, straight to voicemail. I texted her, "There's someone in the store, using my name, please call me." No response. By 2:30 a.m., I started convincing myself it was all some elaborate system glitch or prank. I told Paul I'd go review the security logs properly. He just nodded, probably happy to stay busy with his mop. In the office, I pulled up the employee camera feed archives. Each timestamp synced with a login record. At 9:58 p.m., there were two separate logins, mine and another, Andrea S. The second one came from the warehouse terminal, a terminal that hadn't been active since 2017. The back of my neck tingled. I clicked through the recorded footage from the loading dock. It was dark at first. Then a shape entered from the far left. The lens, adjusted just enough for me to see her face. My face, but older, slightly heavier around the eyes. She looked tired, moving slowly, like she'd done this 100 times before. She walked straight toward the camera, stared directly into it, then stepped out of frame. I backed away from the desk, breathing unevenly. "This is impossible," I whispered. I left the office and went straight to the warehouse door. The motion sensor light came on instantly, blinding me for a second. When my vision adjusted, I saw footprints on the dusty concrete floor, fresh, leading toward the emergency exit. I followed them, careful, heart pounding. They ended right at the red steel door. The alarm sign above it blinked, but the alarm didn't sound. Someone had disabled it. My hand trembled as I pushed the bar. The cold air outside hit me like a slap. The lot was empty except for my own car and a single Walmart delivery truck idling with its headlights off. A silhouette sat in the driver's seat. I hesitated, then called out, "Elliot?" The window rolled halfway down. I took a few cautious steps closer. The driver turned his head, and I felt something tighten in my chest. It was me, or at least someone who looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same tired face, same Walmart badge. She smiled faintly. "Thanks for covering my shift," she said. I stumbled backward. "Who are you?" I managed to say. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached over to the passenger seat and held up my uniform vest, the one I was currently wearing. "You forgot this," she said calmly. "You'll need it next time." The engine revved. I froze as the truck rolled backward, then turned toward the service road and disappeared into the dark. My body wouldn't move for a full minute. When I finally went back inside, the warehouse was silent again. I rushed to the office, replayed the feed, nothing. The last truck recording was from the evening shift, long before I'd arrived. At 5 a.m., Andrea finally called back. I told her everything, stammering through the details. She paused for a long time, then said quietly, "Andrea, you weren't scheduled tonight." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" You texted me." She sighed. "I didn't. I haven't been online since noon. There's no shift swap request in the system either. You must have gotten some spam text." I opened my messages. The thread was there clear as day, but the number wasn't saved. When I tapped it, it said, "Unknown contact deleted." My throat tightened. "You think I imagined all of this?" She hesitated. "I don't know, but don't go back in tonight. I'll handle it." The next day, corporate security called. They said they reviewed the CCTV footage after a system flag. They found two versions of me clocking in, one at 9:55, one at 9:57. The second version clocked out at 10:03 and left through the employee entrance. The time cards were identical down to the second digit. They asked if I'd been training someone using my credentials. I said no. They told me not to come in until payroll finished investigating. I couldn't sleep that night. Every noise from the street made me flinch. Around 2 a.m., I got a message from an unknown number again. It read, "Appreciate the swap. Next, shift's yours. Be ready." Attached was a short video security footage from inside the Walmart office. The camera showed the chair, the monitors, and me sitting there, watching myself on screen. Then the other me turned toward the camera and whispered something I couldn't hear. By morning, I drove straight to the store. The parking lot was packed with delivery trucks, but the main door was taped off with yellow caution lines. A police cruiser was parked out front. One officer approached and asked my name. When I told him, he frowned. "We were hoping you'd show up," he said. "Your employee file's a mess. Someone used your name to authorize deliveries. Last night, thousands in lost inventory." I tried to explain what happened, but the words sounded ridiculous even to me. Another officer showed me a printed still from the security feed, me handing off paperwork to a driver, time-stamped 3:14 a.m. I wasn't there. I'd been home, staring at that video message on my phone. After that, everything moved fast. Corporate launched a fraud investigation. My login credentials were permanently locked. I kept getting system alerts on my email saying, "New device signed in as Andrea S." from random Walmart terminals across Alberta. They replaced every password and wiped my record clean, as if I'd never worked there. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Paul. He'd been reassigned to another branch. His voice was shaking. "Andrea," he said, "they found a badge during warehouse renovations yours. Same number, same photo, but it's dated 2016. My chest went cold. I didn't start working there until 2018. I hung up and sat in silence for a long time. There's no logical explanation that makes sense anymore. Maybe there never was. But sometimes, around the same time each night, my phone lights up with a system alert. Shift swap request approved. No sender name, no store ID, just that same timestamp, 9:57 p.m. And every time it happens, I can still see her, my reflection in that truck window, smiling like she already knows I'll say yes. Before we jump into the next story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We really need your love and support. It means the world to us, and you're the reason this channel keeps going. Story number 2. I was standing at the return counter, clutching a small plastic dinosaur still sealed in its box, wondering how something so trivial could suddenly feel so heavy in my hand. My son had begged for it last week, his birthday money, his choice, but after realizing he already owned the same one, I promised we'd return it. Simple errand, I told myself. But as I placed the box on the counter, the cashier looked at me as if I'd handed her something dangerous. "Can I see your receipt?" she asked. I slid it across. She scanned it, typed something, frowned, and then called over her manager. The manager was a short woman with cropped hair and a calm, almost rehearsed tone. "Sir, could you confirm your name and signature on this receipt?" she asked, turning the screen toward me. My name was printed correctly, and the signature looked like mine because it was. I had just signed it 30 seconds ago. But then she clicked into another file. We have a record of a nearly identical refund from this store. Same item, same UPC, 3 years ago. Signed under a different name. Would you like to explain that? I laughed, confused. You think I returned this toy 3 years ago? That's impossible. I just bought it last week. My son was still holding my hand, staring up at me. The manager didn't laugh back. She pulled up a scanned image of an old receipt. I swear, my heart stopped when I saw it. The signature was identical, same tilt, same slant. Even the tiny cross through that "ain't" I always make without realizing. But the name wasn't mine. It read Callum Doran. I said I didn't know any Callum Doran. She asked if I was sure. I nodded, but she kept watching me, as though waiting for me to crack. I turned to my son. Eli, wait right here, I said, trying to steady my voice. He nodded, clutching the box tighter now. The manager asked me to follow her to the back office. My pulse was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The air inside that small beige room felt stale, like recycled breath. She sat across from me. Another man joined security, maybe. He folded his arms. You were seen on camera processing a return at this desk in March 2013, he said flatly. You claimed a refund for a missing child's toy, same barcode. That child's name was registered under our extended warranty system. Does that ring any bells? What? I blurted. Missing child? What the hell are you talking about? The woman exchanged a look with him. The item was purchased by a woman named Helen Doran, she said softly. Her son, Callum, went missing the week after. Police reviewed the receipts. Your handwriting appeared on one of them. I couldn't breathe properly. You're saying my handwriting, my signature, was on something tied to a missing kid? That's insane. They played a short, grainy clip on the monitor. The footage showed a man at the same counter, returning a toy dinosaur. The image was too low quality to make out details, but the man's build, medium height, dark jacket, slightly hunched shoulders, looked disturbingly familiar. Like seeing myself in a dream I couldn't remember having. My voice broke a little. That's not me. Then explain the handwriting, the man said. I told them I had no idea. They kept the receipt. I demanded to speak to someone higher up. They said the file was part of an active police inquiry, being reviewed again since a parent had recently contacted them. I didn't even know what to say. Eventually, they let me go reluctantly. But before I left, the manager stopped me. If you remember anything, she said, about who might have used your name before, it could help more than you think. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying that grainy clip in my mind, trying to find something that proved it wasn't me. My wife noticed I was restless and asked what happened. I told her everything. She didn't laugh or get angry, just looked pale, like she'd seen a ghost. Your dad's name was Callum, she said slowly. I froze. He'd left when I was 6. I hadn't thought about him in years. And your mum, her maiden name was Doran. I sat there for a full minute before I said, that can't be right. But the name on the screen earlier, Callum Doran, it wasn't a coincidence. The next day, I went back to the store, half expecting them to tell me it was a mistake. The same manager was there. When I told her what I'd found out about my father's name, she seemed taken aback. Can you give me a moment? She said, then disappeared into the office. When she came back, her tone had changed. She asked if I could wait for someone. 15 minutes later, a police officer walked in. He introduced himself as Detective Greaves. We've reopened a missing child case from 2013. Your name's come up in connection with an item returned at this location, he said. You're not in trouble, we just need to clarify a few things. We sat in a small booth near the cafe. He showed me photos, old security stills. a smiling boy around 5 years old with messy blonde hair. "This is Callum Doran," he said. "His mother worked 2 blocks from here. She came in to buy him this toy. Said he'd been asking for it for weeks." I nodded numbly, the plastic dinosaur still fresh in my mind. "He disappeared the next day," Greaves continued. "The refund came in a week later, same toy, same receipt number, signed by someone calling himself Callum Doran. I asked how that was possible. He didn't answer directly. The thing is," he said, "we had handwriting analysis done back then. It was inconclusive, but when we compared your recent return form, the match was near perfect. Pen pressure, stroke sequence, everything. You mind telling me if you've ever lived in Glasgow before 2013? I shook my head. "Never. I moved here in 2014, after Eli was born." He scribbled something in his notebook, then asked if I'd ever changed my name legally. I said no. He thanked me for cooperating and gave me his card, telling me not to worry. But the way he said it made me worry more. Over the next week, things started to feel off. My debit card was declined once because the system said the username was inconsistent. When I checked online banking, there were 2 accounts listed under my name. One with my details, one created years earlier with my father's birth date. Both had the same signature on file. Then Eli started having nightmares. He said there was a man who looks like you, Dad, watching him from the hallway at night. I told him it was just a dream, but the second time, he said the man told him not to lose his toy again. That night, I took the dinosaur box from his shelf and locked it in my wardrobe. I started digging into records about my father. He disappeared in 1992, leaving behind debts and a forged business name. There was one vague mention in an old report, last seen at retail outlet, believed to be operating under alias. The store listed? Walmart. That detail lodged itself in my chest like a splinter. I contacted Detective Greaves again and told him everything about my father, about Eli's nightmares, about the accounts. He met me at the store after hours. We stood by the return desk where it all started. The store was silent except for the hum of the coolers. He said quietly, "We found something you should see." From his folder, he pulled the original 2013 refund slip, the one supposedly signed by me. There, faintly printed at the bottom, was an additional note in red ink. "Refund approved by staff ID #4276. Greaves looked at me. "That number's not assigned to anyone." Never was. We went into the storage office. The system logs showed refund 4,276 was still active, processing automatically once every few years for toy recall. Replacements. The timestamp for the next scheduled one was my stomach drop this week. Greaves turned to me. "If someone used your father's ID, we'll know soon." He told me to go home, but I couldn't. I waited in the parking lot that night, watching the store close. The fluorescent lights inside flickered off one by one until only the faint blue glow of the self-checkouts remained. I don't know why I stayed. I think I needed to see something make sense again. Around midnight, a delivery truck pulled into the side dock. It wasn't marked. A man got out wearing a uniform that didn't match the store's. He carried a box shaped exactly like the toy's packaging. I grabbed my phone to record, but when I looked back up, he was gone. The dock door was shut. The next morning, Greaves called. The system had logged the refund again. Same ID number, same barcode. Except this time, the customer name read Eli McGregor, my son's name. I ran to his room, heart in my throat. The bed was empty. The toy dinosaur box was gone. I screamed for my wife. We tore through the house, checked every door, every corner. Nothing. I called the police, hysterical. Within minutes, officers were at my door. Greaves came too, face pale. He said they were reviewing footage from the store immediately. At the station, they showed me the video. It was grainy, like the one before. But this time, I saw clearly. A man at the counter, holding the dinosaur toy, handing it to the cashier. The date stamp was that morning. The man was wearing my jacket. His hair was shorter, darker, but the posture, the way he leaned when signing it, was unmistakable. He looked like me. I slammed my hands on the desk. "That's not me!" I shouted. Greaves didn't respond right away. Then he said, "The signature matches your last one, perfectly. Same pen pressure." They searched everywhere. For hours. Then, just after dawn, a patrol found Eli sitting on a bench outside the same Walmart, holding the toy. He was pale but unharmed. When they asked him what happened, he said, "Dad took me shopping." But then he said he had to go back inside. He told me to wait. I was at the station the whole time. After that, the case went quiet. They reviewed every angle, every timestamp. The CCTV of the man walking in glitched halfway through, half his face pixelated, the frame skipping like old film. The store manager confirmed no employee processed that refund. The terminal activated itself. Greaves said it was impossible, some kind of data corruption. I wanted to believe that. But when I tucked Eli into bed that night, he whispered. The man said he's sorry he lost his toy before, and that he'll come back for the new one soon. I went cold. I checked the dinosaur's tag again, same barcode, same receipt number. Only this time, the printed signature at the bottom wasn't mine or my father's. It just said, "Approved by 4,276. A week later, the store closed temporarily for inventory updates. I went back once it reopened. The entire refund counter had been replaced with new machines, gleaming silver and touchscreen. I asked if they still had old transaction records, but the staff said the system was wiped during the upgrade. I asked if anyone had worked there before 2013. One woman, older, said she remembered something. "We used to get those toy returns every few years," she said quietly. "Always the same model, always approved automatically. We thought it was some corporate recall thing, but after that missing boy, they told us never to talk about it again." I asked her what happened to the refund ID. She looked around, lowered her voice. That was the number for the night supervisor who went missing in '92. They said he walked out mid-shift and never came back. Name was Callum something. I didn't ask her to repeat it. I still have the toy in a sealed box. Eli won't touch it. Sometimes at night, I hear faint clicking from my wardrobe, like a pen tapping against paper. Every time I check, the box is exactly where I left it. But once, I swear the signature on the receipt looked darker, as if freshly signed again. I told myself, it's just my eyes, just paranoia. But part of me knows better, because when I finally looked up my father's employment record, I found its store number, position, termination date. The note beside it read, "Resigned during investigation of fraudulent refunds, last signature on file." Identical to self. I haven't been back to Walmart since. Story number 3. I remember crouching between the racks of winter coats, my knees pressed against cold linoleum, trying not to laugh as my best friend Tom whispered, "You'll chicken out before midnight." It was 8:45 p.m., a Saturday night in 1990, and we were two 12-year-olds who thought hiding inside Walmart after closing would make us legends at school. I still remember how the fluorescent lights hummed above us, and how the smell of new fabric mixed with popcorn from the front snack counter. Back then, Walmart in Invercargill wasn't open 24 hours. It closed at 9 sharp, and tonight I plan to stay until sunrise. When the loudspeaker called, "Store closing in 10 minutes, Tom nudged me. Last chance to back out. I just grinned. I told him to go home and wait for my call tomorrow morning. He rolled his eyes but agreed, waving as he slipped out through the main doors. I watched him go, then ducked deeper into the rack, holding my breath as footsteps passed by. My heart raced like it was trying to escape my chest. I wasn't scared yet, just wired, like I'd swallowed too much soda. Minutes later, the final announcement echoed through the store. "Attention customers, we are now closed. Please proceed to the checkout." Then came the metallic rattle of security gates being pulled down, the whir of closing tills, laughter from the staff as they finished up. I listened closely. One by one their voices faded. The hum of the lights remained, constant and sterile. I stayed still, counting slowly to 200 before daring to move. When I finally peeked out, the store was empty. The stillness was weirdly heavy, like the air had thickened. I crept out from the clothing rack and wandered toward the toy aisle. I remember feeling thrilled, like I had the world's biggest playground to myself. I grabbed a Nerf gun, aimed it down the aisle, and whispered, "Freeze," at a mannequin near the electronics section. The echo of my own voice startled me. It was louder than I expected, bouncing through the empty space. That was the first time it hit me how big the store really was when no one else was in it. About 15 minutes later, I heard a metallic clang from somewhere near the back. I froze. It sounded like something dropping a shelf, or a cart maybe. I whispered to myself that it was just the building settling, or maybe someone locking up the loading dock, but a part of me wasn't convinced. The sound came again, slower this time, like a wheel rolling unevenly over tile. I ducked behind a stack of cereal boxes and waited. Nothing followed. I decided to make my way toward the employee break area at the back of the store, where I'd seen vending machines earlier. I wanted a snack, but mostly I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't scared. As I passed the electronics section, I noticed something strange. The TVs along the wall were on. Not all of them, just one, showing static. I frowned. I was sure the power was supposed to be shut off after closing. That's when I heard the faint whir of a vacuum cleaner. It was distant, somewhere near the produce section. I hesitated. Maybe a cleaner had come in after hours. That made sense until I remembered overhearing two employees earlier saying maintenance was scheduled for tomorrow, and that tonight the power in the back half of the store would be disconnected. My stomach tightened. If the power was cut, what was running that vacuum? I inched closer, my sneakers barely making a sound. The whirring grew louder. I could almost see the reflection of a machine's rotating brush through the glass doors near the bakery. Then suddenly, it stopped. The silence that followed was deafening. I waited, half expecting someone to call out, but there was nothing. Then a voice came over the intercom. It wasn't the usual tone, no cheerful staff announcement, just a slow, low male voice saying, "Aisle 7. That was it. I froze. The intercom crackled softly, then went dead. I told myself it had to be a leftover recording, maybe someone testing the system earlier. But my hands were sweating. I looked down the main aisle, toward the numbered signs. Aisle 7 was housewares. I don't know why I felt drawn to go there. Maybe I thought I'd find someone who could explain what was happening. The closer I got, the more uneasy I felt. A plastic bucket had tipped over in the middle of the floor, still dripping mop water. There were wet streaks across the tiles, as if someone had just cleaned them and stopped halfway through. The lights above aisle 7 flickered, one after another, like a wave moving toward the back. My throat went dry. Then I saw movement at the far end, a shape, crouched, dragging something metallic across the floor. I backed up fast, heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my ears. I didn't run yet. I ducked behind a shelf and peeked through the gaps between boxes. The shape straightened. It looked like a person, thin, tall, wearing what might have been a cleaner's uniform, but something was off. The head moved slowly side to side, too rhythmically, like a mechanical motion. I blinked, and when I looked again, the aisle was empty. I bolted toward the clothing section, slipping slightly on the polished tiles. I told myself to find the front door, to leave, to end the stupid dare. But when I reached the main entrance, the security gate was already down. I grabbed the metal grating and shook it, but it didn't budge. My voice echoed off the glass as I yelled for help. Nothing. Just silence, and then, faintly, the intercom again. Aisle 7. I turned and saw the overhead lights go out, one row at a time, starting from the back. Each click echoed louder than the last, plunging section after section into darkness. The store was being swallowed by blackness. I pressed myself against the gate, watching as the only light left came from the flickering TV and electronics. Then the vacuum started. Again. It was closer this time. Much closer. The steady hum vibrated through the floor beneath my feet. I couldn't see where it was coming from, but I could feel it. I sprinted toward the checkout counters, ducking behind the first one and crawling on my hands and knees. My breathing was ragged, and I had to bite my lip to keep from gasping too loud. The hum passed by, maybe 10 meters away, and I caught a glimpse of something gliding across the floor, a dark shape pushing the vacuum, moving without the jerky rhythm of a person. I waited until the sound faded, then crawled toward the side exit near the employee area. The emergency door had a metal bar and a sign that read, "Alarm will sound." I didn't care. I slammed it open. Nothing happened. No alarm, no sound, just a rush of cold air and another realization. The door opened to a hallway, not outside. It was an interior corridor leading to the loading bay. My pulse pounded as I moved forward. The hallway lights were dim, flickering every few seconds. The air smelled of oil and detergent. I could see the end of the hall where the loading dock door was rolled shut. Just before I reached it, I noticed a clipboard hanging by the wall. On it were sheets with handwritten notes: Maintenance, 17, June 1989, Power Test Failed. Then another, Maintenance, 24, June 1989, Technician lost during inspection. Status, pending. My chest tightened. Lost. That word stuck. I turned to leave, but there was a sound behind me. Not footsteps, more like fabric dragging across the floor. I turned just enough to see something pale sliding around the corner. My instincts screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The thing emerged slowly. A person, but not right. The uniform looked old, discolored, and soaked at the edges. The face was grayish, features sunken like wax. It didn't walk, it sort of dragged, as if its feet didn't quite touch the ground. And in its hand was the vacuum. I stumbled backward, knocking into a metal cart that clattered loudly. The figure froze. Then, it tilted its head toward me. The sound that came out wasn't speech, it was the hum of the vacuum, growing louder, like it was coming from inside its chest. I turned and ran for the loading door, slamming my shoulder against it again and again until the latch gave way. I fell through into the cold night air, scraping my hands on the asphalt. The back lot was empty. Not a single car, not even the delivery trucks that usually lined the dock. The air felt still, heavy. I didn't look back. I ran straight for the fence at the edge of the property, climbed it, tore my jeans on the wire, and hit the ground running. By the time I reached the main road, I could still hear that faint hum, carried by the wind. When I got home, my parents were furious at first. I tried to explain what happened, but the story came out in broken bursts about the intercom, the cleaner, the power outage. They didn't believe me, of course. They thought I'd just panicked in the dark. The next morning, they took me to the Walmart to prove everything was fine. But when we got there, the store was still closed. A sign on the door said, "Temporarily shut due to electrical inspection." 2 days later, I overheard my father on the phone with a friend who worked for the maintenance company. He looked pale afterward. When I asked what was wrong, he just said, "Don't worry about it." Years later, I found out what he'd heard. Apparently, the crew who came to inspect that night never logged out of their shift. The maintenance log listed them as present for 3 consecutive nights, even though no one was in the building. For a long time, I convinced myself I'd imagined most of it. Childhood fear, bad lighting, a vivid imagination. But one afternoon, about a decade later, when I was 22 and working part-time at a hardware store, I went into the back office to drop off receipts. There was an old bulletin board with random safety notices pinned to it. One of the pages caught my eye. It was yellowed, torn at the corners. At the top it said, "Maintenance Team Schedule, Invercargill, Walmart, June 1989. Below the list of names was a small note scrawled in red pen, "If vacuum hums after power cut, leave immediately." My stomach dropped. I traced the handwriting with my finger. It was dated just 3 weeks before the night I stayed there. Even now, 30 years later, I can still hear that sound if I think hard enough, the low mechanical hum echoing through an empty building. I tell myself it was a machine left on, or a trick of the acoustics. But every time I walk into a big store and the intercom crackles to life, part of me tenses, waiting to hear those same 2 words that chased me through the aisles all those years ago. Aisle 7. Story number 4. I was halfway through sorting the crumpled notes in the donation box when I noticed the first one, a laminated school ID, wedged between 2 folded 20 Rand bills. At first, I thought some parent had accidentally dropped it in, maybe a kid's badge mixed with loose change. But then I found another, and another. Little rectangles of plastic, scuffed and bent, all belonging to children from different schools around Durban. Their faces stared up at me with those fixed smiles, frozen mid-childhood, some names already half-faded. I was 17 then, volunteering for my school's community service hours. My job was simple: stand next to the Walmart entrance with a clipboard, collect donations for a local children's charity, and make sure no one tampered with the box. It was one of those transparent acrylic boxes with a thin slit on top, secured with a dull metal lock. They'd handed me the key that morning, said I'd return it to the customer service desk at the end of my shift. Only later, I'd learned that no such key had ever been logged in the store's system. By late afternoon, the rush had slowed. Most people ignored me, some smiled politely, and a few threw coins without making eye contact. The sound of metal hitting metal became background noise. I remember feeling proud of the little pile growing inside. Around 4:30, a man in a gray jacket stood longer than usual by the box. He had one of those faces that were both familiar and forgettable early 50s. Sharp cheekbones, eyes that darted like he was late for something. He asked, "You work for the charity or the store?" His tone was casual, but his eyes were studying me, not the sign or the donation box. "The charity," I said, though technically I was just a volunteer. He nodded slowly and dropped in a handful of coins. They clattered louder than expected, like they hit something other than more coins. When he walked away, I realized he hadn't gone into the store. He just kept walking toward the parking lot. That small moment didn't seem strange until later, when I was called to the back room to help count the donations. The manager on duty, a tired-looking woman named Mrs. Jacobs, handed me a pair of gloves and said, "We just need to verify totals before we pass it to the charity rep." We sat at a folding table behind customer service, with the smell of bleach and cardboard boxes thick in the air. I turned the key, lifted the lid, and began sorting. Notes, coins, a few receipts, normal things. Then came the first school ID. Jacobs looked up from her calculator. "What's that?" she asked. "An ID," I said. "Probably fell in by accident." But when I laid out the others, her expression changed. There were at least 10 of them by then, maybe more. She told me to stop counting, picked one up and muttered, "Street Teresa's, that's in Wentworth, isn't it?" I nodded. She stared at it for a long time before slipping it into her pocket. We went through the rest of the box carefully. That's when the baby bracelets appeared, the kind hospitals use. Soft plastic bands with printed tags. They were dirty, stiff, some with faded ink. A few still had names visible. Baby male Dlamini, infant Mube. Jacobs's hands shook as she pulled them out one by one. "Okay," she said finally, forcing a breath. "We'll stop here. Don't mention this to anyone, all right?" She called someone on her radio, the head of security, I assumed. 10 minutes later, 2 guards showed up and quietly escorted me out of the back room. One of them locked the door behind me. I waited near the employee lockers, confused and a little scared, until Jacobs came out again. "You can go home," she said flatly. "We'll handle the rest." Her tone wasn't angry. It was protective, almost maternal. But it didn't help the pit forming in my stomach. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about those IDs. I remembered one name, a girl, maybe 9 or 10, with braids and a wide grin. Her name tag said Lorado M. Something about her smile stayed in my head. I searched her name online when I got home, adding Durban and missing. The first result made my chest tighten. A missing child report from 2004. The same face, the same photo. She'd been gone for nearly a year. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. I told myself it could have been coincidence. Maybe her parents donated old belongings to raise awareness. But why would so many IDs end up in one donation box? The next morning, I went back early. The donation box was gone. The charity banner, too. I asked the cashier, who said they'd removed it after an internal review. When I asked about Mrs. Jacobs, the woman said she wasn't in family emergency. Something in her tone told me to stop asking. But I couldn't. I needed to know what happened to the IDs, to Lorado's bracelet, so I did something stupid. That evening, I waited near the back door until the security guards switched shifts, then slipped inside. The store was quieter than I'd ever seen it. Lights dimmed, music off. I moved toward the back hall, where I'd been counting donations the day before. The door was still locked, but through the small window I saw movement, someone inside, sorting papers under a desk lamp. It was Jacobs. I knocked softly, and she jumped. Her face went pale when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she whispered through the door. "I just want to know what you found," I said. "Please." She hesitated, then unlocked it just enough for me to slip in. The box sat open on the table. The cash was gone. In its place were rows of IDs and bracelets, spread out neatly like evidence. Jacobs rubbed her temples and said, "They told me to send everything to head office, but I made copies first. Something's not right here." She pointed to a stack of photocopies, reports of missing children, all within a 50-kilometer radius. Many of them corresponded to the names on the IDs. "The charity's legitimate," she said, "but someone's been collecting more than donations." I asked who, but she only shook her head. "There's one more thing," she said, opening a small envelope. Inside was a photograph, grainy, black and white, from an old security camera. It showed the man in the gray jacket dropping something into the box, but his hand was holding more than coins. In his palm was what looked like a hospital wristband. "He's come 3 times this month," Jacobs said. "Always cash. Always this box." She folded the photo and slipped it into my hand. "Leave it alone, Tabo. People disappear when they ask questions about children here." I left through the side door, my pulse hammering in my ears. Outside, the air felt thick, heavy, like I was breathing through cotton. I walked fast, head down, until I reached the taxi rank. My reflection in a car window startled me. I looked pale, older somehow. At home, I locked my room and pulled out the photo. I couldn't stop staring at the man's hand. The bracelet's label was faint, but the last letters were clear enough. Minnie. Tlamini, one of the names from the bracelets we'd found. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those plastic bands, the tiny scrawled names, the sound of coins hitting something hollow beneath. The next day, I called the charity directly. The woman who answered sounded warm, almost relieved at first until I mentioned the IDs. Her tone changed instantly. "That's impossible," she said. "We don't use physical collection boxes anymore. Everything's digital now." I told her I'd personally worked the box yesterday. There was a long pause. Then she said, very quietly, "We stopped using boxes 5 years ago, after incidents." I asked, "What kind?" She hung up. I went back to the Walmart. Again, that afternoon, pretending to shop. The box was still gone, but I noticed a new plastic sheet taped near the entrance. Under investigation by SAPS, it read in bold letters. Below it, smaller text. Information regarding charitable fraud or missing persons may be reported to. I didn't finish reading. A man in a gray jacket was standing by the entrance, hands in his pockets, looking straight at me. His expression didn't change, but he tilted his head slightly, almost curious. I dropped the basket I was holding and left without buying anything. 2 days later, police came to my school. They asked me to recount what I'd seen, what I'd handled, who had access to the box. They already knew about Jacobs. She'd turned herself in for questioning, claiming she'd withheld evidence. I told them everything. They took the photo from me, logged it as evidence. A detective, a tall man with soft eyes, told me gently, "You did the right thing. That man you saw, we've been looking for him a long time." His name, it turned out, was listed in old hospital employment records. He'd worked in pediatric wards across KwaZulu-Natal in the 92nd and early 2000s. Dismissed twice for administrative irregularities, whatever that meant. He disappeared in 2001. No death certificate, no forwarding address, just gone. And somehow, 4 years later, he was at a Walmart in Durban, feeding hospital tags into a donation box. For weeks, I waited for news, arrests, headlines, something, but nothing came. The investigation continued quietly, they said. Jacobs resigned. The charity dissolved. Walmart replaced the entire entrance setup with new branding, brighter lights, and security staff. Life moved on. But I couldn't. I'd dream about that table, the bracelets laid out like a grim inventory. Sometimes I'd imagine hearing the rattle of coins again, even when I was nowhere near a store. One evening, about a month later, I got a letter. No return address. Just my name written in neat, old-fashioned handwriting. Inside was a photo, a different one this time. It showed me, standing beside the donation box, smiling. Behind me, in the blurry background, was the same gray jacket, the same man. The note attached read, "Thank you for keeping them remembered." My hands shook so hard I almost tore it. I burned the photo in the sink that night, but the image still branded itself into my head. Years have passed. I still live in Durban, but I can't go near that Walmart without my stomach tightening. Every now and then, when a charity drive sets up in front of the store, I watch from across the street. Different volunteers, different causes, yet, sometimes, the boxes look too familiar. Transparent acrylic, dull lock, same slit on top. Once, I saw a small hand reach up to drop in a coin. The mother tugged her child away, smiling. The box caught the reflection of the setting sun, or maybe it was just my eyes watering. I walked away before I could see what fell inside. They never found the man. The official statement said, insufficient evidence. But I know what I saw, what I touched. The cold plastic of those baby bracelets. The faint smell of antiseptic clinging to the paper bills. Sometimes I wonder if he was ever real at all, or if he was just someone using the donations as an excuse to leave something behind. I've kept one thing though. It's wrong, I know, but I couldn't let it go. One of the bracelets slipped into my sleeve that day without me noticing. Baby male Dlamini. I keep it in a drawer, sealed in a zip bag. The ink is barely visible now, but the outline of the letters remains. It's the only proof I have that any of it happened, that beneath all the good intentions, something darker was collecting, coin by coin, name by name. Which story setting scared you the most? Let me know in the comments. Story number 5. I was halfway through the checkout aisle when I noticed it for the first time. My shopping cart rolled a few inches forward on its own. It wasn't a steep floor, no slant, nothing that could have made it move. I thought maybe I nudged it with my hip while unloading groceries. But when I looked down, the front wheels were perfectly still, then jerked once more as if pulled by an invisible hand. It was past 11 p.m. The Christchurch Walmart was nearly empty. I'd gone in to grab shampoo, bread, and instant noodles after a long day at work. Late night shopping was my quiet ritual. Fewer eyes, fewer stares. People tend to look longer than they should when they realize I'm not exactly what they expect. That night, the silence felt heavier than usual. I could hear every squeak of the cart, the faint hum of the refrigerators, the flicker of one bad ceiling light above the dairy section. I remember gripping the cart's handle tighter, pushing it toward the next aisle, trying to ignore that creeping feeling in my chest. But the moment I stopped to check prices, it rolled forward again. Just a slow, deliberate glide, maybe 2 feet. My first thought was static in the wheels, or the floor being slightly uneven. I even laughed to myself, muttering, "Get a grip, Lila, it's just physics." But deep down, something about that smooth, unprompted motion felt aware. I moved on to the cleaning products aisle, still a bit uneasy. My cart followed me perfectly, obediently. I parked it to grab a sponge pack. When I turned back, it was gone. My stomach dropped. I scanned both ends of the aisle, thinking maybe it drifted to the main walkway. Nothing. Then, from 2 aisles down, I heard the faint rattle of wheels turning a slow, rhythmic roll, stopping, then starting again. I walked toward the sound, trying not to look paranoid, though my pulse had started hammering. When I turned the corner, there it was, my cart, waiting neatly at the start of the pet. A food section. I hadn't been anywhere near that part of the store. My bag was still inside, along with the bread and shampoo. I laughed nervously, pushing it back. "Guess you're haunted now," I whispered. At the checkout, the cashier, a tired-looking young guy, noticed my shaking hands. "You all right there, ma'am?" he asked. I forced a smile and said, "Yeah, just dropped my phone earlier." I paid and left quickly, eager to forget it. But later that night, sitting in my car outside my apartment, I remembered something odd. When I'd parked earlier, I left my dash cam running. It automatically starts recording when the engine's on. I hadn't turned it off during my short Walmart trip, just locked the car and gone in. I opened the footage out of curiosity, thinking maybe I'd catch some random movement from the reflection through the store window. At first, everything looked normal, just me walking through aisles, occasionally stopping. But when I reached the part where the cart rolled on its own, I froze. In the reflection of a freezer door behind me, a faint shape moved in sync with my actions, a shadow that didn't quite match mine. It mirrored every small motion I made, like a delayed echo. When I bent down to grab something, it did too, but not in the reflection's timing. It lagged by a second, almost like it was learning. I paused the footage and leaned closer. My own outline was clear under the bright store lights. Shoulders, hair, arms. But the other shape was softer, darker, like a double exposure. And when my cart rolled by itself, that shape reached out. I told myself it had to be a lighting glitch, maybe my phone's poor video quality causing artifacts. I deleted the clip, convinced I was overthinking, and went to bed. But I couldn't sleep. The sound of the wheels rolling, just that quiet creak, kept replaying in my mind. The next evening, I went back to the store. I told myself I was being ridiculous, but I needed to see that aisle again, to prove it was nothing. Everything was normal. The cleaning section, the pet food aisle, bright, orderly, nothing unusual. I even checked the floor for tilts by rolling a can of soda. It didn't move. Then I saw the same cashier from last night. He smiled weakly and said, "Hey, weird question. Were you here really late yesterday?" I nodded, heart pounding. "Why?" I asked. He hesitated, glancing toward the back of the store. "Because when I closed up, your cart was back by the freezer section again, full of your same stuff. I thought you forgot something, but your receipt was still there on the belt." My blood went cold. "That's impossible," I said. "I took it with me." He shrugged. "Maybe I mixed it up, but it had bread, shampoo, and those noodles, same brand, same pack size. I didn't sleep that night either. I couldn't stop thinking about how the cart seemed to know where to go. The next day, I parked closer to the entrance, turned the dash cam on again, and went inside. I picked up random items, cereal, detergent, batteries, just to distract myself. I noticed my reflection in the glass freezer doors again, but I couldn't bring myself to look closely. I felt like if I did, I'd see that thing again. At one point, I turned down the hardware aisle and felt the air change. It was subtle at first, like static, a prickle against my forearms. My cart rolled backward this time, slowly, softly, until it stopped behind me. When I looked, the wheels were angled inward, as if someone had just turned them. My throat went dry. "All right, whoever's doing this, it's not funny," I said out loud, my voice cracking. A distant voice answered someone paging an employee far away. I shoved the cart forward and kept moving. But no matter which aisle I entered, it rolled behind me, even when I stopped pushing. Once, it even turned left with me at the end of an aisle before I could touch it. When I reached self-checkout, I noticed the same tired cashier watching me from across the room. He mouthed something, 2 words I couldn't quite catch. I paid fast and left without looking back. In the car, I replayed the footage again. The same thing every time the cart moved, that faint shape appeared beside me. But this time, its outline had definition. A figure, almost the same height and build as me. I could even see the faint glimmer of hair where light hit it. It moved when I moved, stopped when I stopped, but when I froze completely, it didn't. It leaned closer to me instead. I paused the video, hands trembling. For a moment, I thought about calling the police, but what would I even report? A haunted grocery cart? A glitch in a reflection? They'd laugh. Or worse, think I was unstable. I showed the footage to a friend the next morning, my coworker Maya. She watched it silently, then rewound the part where the shape reached toward me. It's you, she said finally. Like a delayed mirror. I frowned. That's what I thought. But why is it touching the cart before I do? She didn't answer. She just handed back my phone slowly and said, "Maybe don't go there again." I didn't, for a while. A week passed, but curiosity has a way of eating at you. Every night, I'd think about the cart rolling toward aisle 12. The shadows mirrored movements, the way the reflection seemed a second behind. It didn't feel random, it felt intentional. So I went back again, just once more, to test something. I waited until nearly closing. I brought only my phone, no bag, no groceries. I pushed a cart slowly through each aisle, watching its wheels carefully. Nothing happened for 15 minutes. Then, right as I passed aisle 10, it jerked left. My heart skipped. It rolled ahead without my hand touching it straight toward aisle 12 again. I followed. It stopped midway down the aisle, right by the shelves of paper towels. I stood still, whispering, "What do you want?" And then I heard the faintest sound, metal rattling, like another cart brushing against mine. I turned sharply. The aisle was empty. But in the glass door of the freezer beside me, I saw her. She looked exactly like me, same clothes, same hair, but her face wasn't mine. The expression was wrong. Her eyes were too wide, her mouth slightly parted as if whispering something I couldn't hear. I took one step back, and she didn't move. She just stood there, hands on her cart, staring through the glass. When I blinked, she was gone. I left everything and ran out. My chest hurt by the time I reached my car. I turned on the dash cam and let it record while I sat trembling, trying to breathe. After a few minutes, I dared to look into the store through the windshield. The lights flickered once, and then, in the faint reflection of the entrance doors, I saw her again, standing still, watching. I don't remember driving home. But I do remember waking up the next morning to a Walmart voicemail saying my items were ready for pickup. I hadn't ordered anything. The list included shampoo, bread, and instant noodles, the same things from that first night. I deleted the message, blocked the number, and threw out the dashcam footage. For weeks afterward, nothing strange happened. I convinced myself it was exhaustion, stress, some elaborate coincidence of reflection and timing. But last month, I moved apartments. And while unpacking, I found something under the front seat of my car, a folded Walmart receipt. It listed shampoo, bread, and instant noodles. The date was the same night as the first incident, but the timestamp was 20 minutes after I'd already left the store. There was a cashier ID number at the bottom. I looked it up online out of curiosity. That ID belonged to a part-time employee who died in a car crash outside that same Walmart 11 years ago on a rainy night in 2012. Her name was Lily. I stared at that receipt for a long time, trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a coincidence, maybe an old system error. But when I looked closer, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. Under customer name, faintly printed in smudged ink, it said, L. McCarthy, my full name. I don't go to that Walmart anymore. I order everything online. But sometimes, late at night, I still hear that squeaky wheel sound outside my flat, just one slow roll, stopping right by the door. And every time, I find a faint lemon scent in the air, like the cleaner they use down aisle 12. Story number 6. They told me the cleaning crew had quit without notice, but that didn't make sense when I first started. Their supplies were still there, mops leaned against the wall, carts lined up like soldiers waiting for orders, and half a bucket of murky water sitting by the freezer section. It looked like they'd just stepped out for a smoke break and never came back. My manager, Alan, brushed it off. Back in '88, they just walked out, he said. Never even picked up their paychecks. I remember laughing awkwardly, thinking it was just Irish workplace gossip until I started doing the night shifts myself. Walmart Galway wasn't big, not like the ones in the States. It had that dim, stretched-out layout grocery aisles that seemed longer after midnight, lights that hummed overhead, and a silence so thick you could hear your shoes squeak from 2 aisles away. My shift was simple. Mop, restock, sweep, repeat. But it was my 3rd week when I started noticing small things that didn't line up. I'd find a mop standing upright in the middle of the floor when I was sure I'd leaned it on the wall. Or I'd hear the faint squeak of a cartwheel behind me, slow, deliberate, only to turn around and find nothing there. The first night it really got to me was a Thursday. It was about 2 a.m., the hour when your brain starts drifting between tired and paranoid. I was restocking canned goods when the intercom crackled to life. "Cleaning crew to dairy," it said, in a flat, automated tone. I froze. We didn't have an automated paging system for maintenance, only the daytime manager had the microphone. I stood there for a moment, the can in my hand, waiting for Alan to appear and say it was a joke. But the store stayed silent. Then, from across the aisles, I heard the faint squeal of a cartwheel. I called out, "Hello?" My voice echoed too far, bouncing off the aisles. No answer. I left my trolley and followed the sound. My shoes, sticking slightly to the polished floor. The noise led me past bakery, then frozen foods, then stopped dead at the janitor's room. The door was shut, though it never was during my shift. When I pushed it open, the smell hit me: old detergent, metal, and something sour. Inside, the punch clock hung on the wall, the old analog kind with physical cards still slotted in. I'd never noticed them before. They were yellowed and stiff, and when I leaned in to look, I saw dates from years ago: April 1988. Each card had a name stamped: Declan O'Shea, Moira Byrne, Kevin Lynch. The clock still ticked faintly, as if powered by something long after its cord had been cut. I remember backing away slowly, my heart beating like I'd found something I shouldn't have. I told Alan the next morning, expecting him to laugh it off, but instead, his face went pale. "Those names, they're the crew that vanished," he said quietly. "We had guards and police back then. No one found a thing." He rubbed his forehead, clearly torn between disbelief and guilt. "Just leave it, yeah? Don't go poking around the back rooms." That should have been enough for me to drop it, but curiosity does strange things when fear mixes in. It makes you brave for the wrong reasons. A week later, I stayed after hours to help with inventory. Alan had gone home early, leaving me and another new hire, Leah. Around 1 a.m. I heard footsteps from the back hallway, quick, soft ones, like someone hurrying not to be caught. I thought maybe a supervisor had come in, but when I looked, the hallway was empty. Leah came up behind me and said, "Did you move the carts?" I asked her what she meant, and she pointed to the entrance. Every single janitor cart was now lined up across the doorway, side by side, blocking the exit. We stood there, staring. Neither of us had touched them. I tried to move one, but the wheel wouldn't budge. It was as if it had rusted in place. Leah kept glancing toward the dark window reflections, whispering, "They said it happened right before Christmas, didn't they?" I didn't know what she was talking about. She told me she'd heard a rumor that the night the crew disappeared, the store had run a late-night inventory push before the holidays. When they checked the logs the next morning, the alarm hadn't been tripped, but every door had been locked from the inside. We decided to leave early. The air in that store felt heavy, not haunted, just wrong. As we walked past the janitor's room, I glanced inside again. This time, the punch cards were gone. The wall was bare, except for one card on the floor. My name was written on it, in neat cursive. The date read, May 1990. It wasn't 1990, it was 2020. I didn't sleep that night. I tried convincing myself it was a prank, maybe Alan having fun with the new hires, but it didn't sit right. The next shift, I came in early and checked the back rooms again. The janitor's area looked different, reorganized, like someone had been cleaning up after years. The punch clock was gone completely. When I asked Alan about it, he said, "We don't even have that old thing anymore." He looked me dead in the eye, like he meant it, but I knew what I'd seen. Later that evening, I noticed my own locker had been relabeled, my name replaced with M. Byrne, one of the missing cleaners. I told Leah, but when she checked, it had been changed back. No one else saw it. 2 nights later, I volunteered to close alone, just to prove to myself that nothing weird was happening. At around 12:30, I was in the cleaning aisle, restocking bleach. I remember the lights flickered, just once, and when they came back, the floor was wet. Not spilled water, freshly mopped. Every tile shone. I could see the reflection of the ceiling fans in it. I hadn't mopped yet. I took a few steps and felt the stickiness of detergent under my shoes. The smell of lemon filled the air, strong and chemical. I whispered, "Who's here?" But my voice sounded too loud. That's when I heard the squeak again, slow, steady, closer. I turned toward the end of the aisle and saw a cart roll by on its own, stopping beside the janitor's closet. It wasn't pushed. It coasted, like it had a purpose. I approached it slowly. The bucket was full, the mop dripping, but the handle was slick and warm, like someone had just used it. The intercom came alive again. "Cleaning crew to front aisle." My hands trembled. "Alan?" I said, but no one answered. The voice repeated, quieter this time. It didn't sound mechanical anymore. It sounded human, weary, like someone repeating a routine. I stepped backward, nearly tripping on the edge of the mop bucket. My heart pounded as I turned to leave, but I froze. Across the glass of the freezer doors, I saw movement, faint reflections of figures in uniforms, pushing carts down other aisles. 3 of them. They didn't look up. They didn't even seem to notice me. I just stood there, gripping the edge of the shelf, whispering to myself that it couldn't be real. When I finally forced myself to move, I ran to the office and grabbed the phone. The line was dead. Every light on the panel blinked red. I decided to go out the back door instead. But as I reached it, something strange caught my eye. The punch clock was there again, mounted to the wall, brand new. Only one card was inside, half pressed in, like it had just been used. It had my name, and the timestamp read 2:03 a.m. It was exactly 2:03. I bolted. I didn't even clock out. I remember fumbling my keys in the car park, hands shaking so badly that I dropped them twice before the door finally opened. I didn't look back at the store. Not once. The next morning, I went straight to HR, told them everything, and asked for my transfer. They didn't argue. But before I left, Alan stopped me in the corridor. He looked tired, older than I. Remembered. "You found the clock, didn't you?" he asked quietly. I nodded. He sighed. "You're not the first." I pressed him for the truth, and he finally told me what had happened back in '88. The crew had been working overnight before a big opening week. At around 3 a.m., a power surge cut the lights. When it came back, the alarm system glitched and locked every door. By the time morning staff arrived, the building was empty. No signs of struggle, no broken locks, just half-finished tasks, carts mid-aisle, mops left standing, as if everyone had simply walked away mid-motion. But the punch clock was still running. All their cards were stamped again 2 weeks later. Same time, same minute. No one ever explained how. I didn't go back to that store for months. But guilt eats at you, especially when you feel like something unfinished has your name on it. So, one day, I drove back to Galway. The Walmart had been shut down for renovations, boarded up, with a "coming soon" banner stretched across the fence. I parked and looked through the glass doors. The floor inside still gleamed faintly. It was spotless. Too spotless. I swear I saw my own reflection mop past the entrance, head down, moving with practiced rhythm. I turned away and drove off, telling myself fatigue was making me see things. But later that week, I got a letter at my flat, no return address. Inside was a single yellow punch card. My name. Dated April 1988. I still have it folded, worn, smelling faintly of lemon cleaner. I never told anyone after that. But sometimes, When I'm walking past late-night stores or hear the sound of a mop squeaking on tile, I can feel that strange pull again, that rhythm of routine that doesn't belong to me anymore. You know how people talk about ghosts like they're trapped souls? I don't think that's what it was. I think that place runs on repetition tasks, so deeply ingrained that when people disappear, their routines don't. They keep mopping, keep clocking in, because that's what they were trained to do. Maybe I brushed too close to it, stayed too long near their time. Maybe that's why my card showed up. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I'd actually clocked out that night instead of running. Maybe it wasn't about escape. Maybe it was about permission to stop working. I try not to think about it, but whenever I hear that faint hum of fluorescent lights, I still imagine them there. Declan, Moira, Kevin, finishing the same floor over and over, never tired, never paid, never gone. Just waiting for someone new to join their shift. Story number 7. The first time I heard Code 91, I was halfway through stacking a row of cereal boxes, bored out of my mind. It was close to 2:30 a.m., that quiet stretch of the night shift when everything feels too still. Just the soft hum of refrigerators and the echo of my own shoes on tile. When the intercom crackled, I almost dropped the box cutter. Code 9-1, it said, flat and mechanical. No one's voice, just that tinny tone we used for system alerts. Then, silence. I didn't think much of it at first. We had dozens of codes, fire, spills, security alerts, but 91 wasn't one I'd ever heard. Still, it tugged at me. I went to the back room door, half expecting someone from security to appear, but the hallway lights beyond were dimmed for the night. I shrugged it off, got back to work. A few minutes later, the intercom came alive again. Code 91, loading dock. This time, it sounded clearer, like a deliberate message. The words sank into me differently, like I wasn't supposed to hear them. I went to the stock office and asked Ryan, the shift manager, if he'd heard it. He was hunched over the monitor, typing inventory counts. Heard what? He said without looking up. Code 91, I told him. He frowned. That's not a thing. You sure you didn't mishear? Maybe Code 9 shoplifting? I told him it said, loading dock. He leaned back in his chair. No deliveries till morning. Just stay in grocery, mate. His tone carried that edge that meant, don't waste my time. I went back, but I couldn't focus. The hum of the ceiling lights felt louder. The aisles looked too long. A cold draft passed from somewhere it shouldn't have, not in that sealed building. I tried to brush it off, but the intercom buzzed again, sharp and deliberate. Code 91, loading dock, immediate. My hands froze mid-stack. I looked up at the speakers. I swear, for a second, I thought I heard breathing behind the static. I told myself it was a prank, probably one of the guys in electronics messing with the system. But still, my body moved before I could reason it out. I left my cart by the cereal aisle and started walking toward the back. Every step echoed through the empty store. I passed toys, automotive, seasonal decor, all silent, all too clean. The closer I got to the stock area, the colder it felt. When I reached the double doors leading to the dock, the temperature dropped hard, like stepping into a fridge. The metal handles felt damp. I pushed through, expecting to find the night truck early, or maybe a broken cooler fan. Instead, the entire dock was lit by a single hanging bulb, swinging slightly. The air smelled faintly of diesel. And there it was, a white delivery truck parked halfway inside the bay, engine running, exhaust curling into the air. No driver. The sight rooted me. Walmart's deliveries were tightly logged times. Drivers, manifests. Nothing ever just showed up. I called out, "Hello? You're early, mate." No answer. I took a few steps closer, boots scraping against concrete. The headlights were off, but the cab light was on, faintly glowing. I could see the driver's door wide open, seat empty, radio hissing static. That's when I heard the intercom again. Code 91 confirmed. Proceed. The voice wasn't from the speakers this time. It came from inside the truck. My stomach tightened. The radio? Maybe. I climbed the small ramp and leaned into the cab. The key was in the ignition, engine idling rough. The smell of fuel was thick. The radio speaker flickered, and the same voice came through, distorted and dry. Inventory. Check. I pulled back fast, almost tripping. My chest was pounding. I ran to the wall phone near the office and called Ryan. He picked up on the third ring, annoyed. What now? I told him there was a truck on the dock, running with no driver. He paused. That's not possible. There's nothing scheduled till 6. I told him I was. Looking at it. He sighed, muttered something, then said, "Fine, I'll come down." While waiting, I circled the back of the truck. The doors were shut but not locked. The latch hung loose, like someone had opened it and then changed their mind. My instincts screamed not to, but curiosity won. I grabbed the handle and lifted. It creaked open to reveal stacks of cardboard boxes, neatly arranged, all blank, no labels, no barcodes, no markings, just brown boxes, all identical, sealed with clear tape. I grabbed the nearest box and set it down. It was lighter than it looked. I pulled out my cutter, sliced through the tape, and peeled it open. Inside were smaller boxes, hundreds of them. I picked one up. It was a name badge. My hands trembled. Each box contained dozens of Walmart employee badges, names, photos, numbers. Some looked new. Others were older, yellowed. The one on top stopped me cold. It had my name, my picture, my employee number. Same uniform photo I'd taken last year. I stared at it for a full minute before I even breathed. "What the hell?" I whispered. I looked through the rest. Some of the names I recognized. People who'd quit, transferred, or just never showed up again. My friend Jeremy from hardware. Tessa from deli. Even the assistant manager who left suddenly after Christmas. The sound of Ryan's boots behind me made me jump. "What are you doing?" he barked. I turned, holding the badge. "You tell me, man, what is this?" He frowned, looked into the truck, then at the badge. His expression shifted, like something he didn't want to see. "Close that up," he said quickly. "Now." His tone had changed, quiet, nervous. "Ryan, whose truck is this?" I asked. He hesitated, eyes darting to the corner camera. "You didn't hear a code. You didn't see a truck. Go back to grocery." I stared at him. "What are you talking about?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "This happens sometimes. It's not for us. Just close it and forget it." I almost laughed. "Forget it? You want me to forget a truck full of IDs?" His jaw tightened. "Please, just go." Before I could argue, the intercom buzzed again, louder than before. "Code 91 complete. Confirm offload." Ryan's face went pale. He grabbed the remote from his belt and tried to cut the power to the speaker, but the sound kept repeating, overlapping itself. "Code 91 complete. Confirm offload." The words grew distorted, layered like a chant. I could feel them vibrating in my chest. Then the truck engine stopped, dead silence. The lights flickered once. Ryan froze. "Go to the front," he whispered. "Now." But I couldn't move. Something inside the truck shifted, a faint thud, then another, like someone moving among the boxes. Ryan grabbed my arm. "Go." He pushed me toward the door. I stumbled, heart slamming, but turned back just in time to see one of the boxes slide off the stack and hit the ground. It split open. More badges spilled out, clattering across the floor. Some were smeared with something dark. One of them slid to my foot. The photo was of Ryan, His face was younger, maybe 5 years ago. The badge number was the same. I looked up at him. He just stared back, eyes wide, chest barely moving. Then, quietly, he said, "That's why you don't open them." He bolted. I followed him through the double doors, down the hall, past the break room. He was breathing hard, muttering, "They never stop sending them." I shouted, Who sends them?" He didn't answer. He ran straight to the security office, slammed the door, and locked it. I stood outside, pounding. "Ryan, what's happening?" No reply. I went back to the dock. The truck's back doors were closed again. The light above flickered steadily. I called out, "Who's there?" Nothing. I walked closer, and then the truck horn blared once, sharp and deafening. I stumbled back, nearly tripping over the scattered badges. The horn cut off as suddenly as it started. I ran to the front office phone and dialed the police. The line buzzed, then clicked, then dropped dead. No tone. I grabbed my cell, no signal. I paced the hallway, trying to calm my breathing. When I turned toward the dock again, the truck was gone. Just gone. The bay door was shut, locked, no tire marks on the wet floor. The air still smelled faintly of exhaust. Ryan didn't come out for the rest of the night. At dawn, the morning manager arrived. I told her everything. She gave me that look people give when they don't want to deal with crazy. There was no truck on the log, she said. No delivery, no incident. She called the night manager's extension. No answer. When she checked the schedule, Ryan's name wasn't listed for that night or any night that week. They called it a system error, told me to take the day off. When I came back 2 nights later, the security office was cleared out. New lock, new camera setup, no trace of Ryan's stuff. I asked around, but nobody had seen him since Tuesday. The store's HR rep said he'd transferred to another location. But a week later, when I was restocking the back aisle, I found something wedged behind the mop rack, a folded printout of the shift roster from that night. Ryan's name was there, highlighted in yellow. Under it, in small handwriting, someone had written, "Code 91, offload complete." I wanted to quit right then, but I needed the job. I convinced myself I'd imagined parts of it, maybe fatigue, maybe stress. But the following month, it happened again. A new guy, Daryl, started working the night shift. 2 weeks in, he came running up to me during restock, pale as chalk. "Did you just hear that?" he said. I asked what. He swallowed hard. "The intercom, code 91. I didn't even answer. I just told him to stay in sight and keep working. A few hours later, I went to the dock myself. Nothing there. No trucks, no lights, just the usual empty space. But when I checked the manifest sheet for the night, one line had been added at the bottom, time-stamped 2:33 a.m. Delivery. 1 vehicle, offloaded. Signed, R. Moore. Ryan's full name. That was my last shift. I didn't tell anyone why I quit. I packed up my locker and left before sunrise. But sometimes I still hear that faint intercom tone in my sleep, followed by the static voice that sounds more and more like my own. Code 91. Loading dock. Immediate. A few months later, I got curious, stupidly curious, and called the store pretending to be from logistics. I asked if they still ran overnight. The woman on the phone said, "We don't do overnights anymore. Closed hours are 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. I asked when that changed. She said, "Since 1999. I told her I worked there that year. She laughed softly. "That's not possible, sir. The store didn't open till 2001. I checked online after that. The original site, the one where I worked, was demolished after a warehouse fire in late 1999. No survivors listed, no cause determined. And yet I remember that smell of diesel, the hum of the lights, and Ryan's hand shoving me towards safety before that truck's engine finally went quiet. Sometimes, when I drive past an empty parking lot at night, I still imagine hearing that faint buzz from a faraway intercom, and I catch myself gripping the wheel too tight. Because deep down, I know that somewhere out there, another truck is idling in the dark, waiting for someone else to answer Code 91. Story number 8. It began with a small mistake. One of those things you notice only because it doesn't fit. I'd just finished grabbing a few groceries after work. Some cereal, paper towels, a new air freshener for my car. Nothing out of the ordinary. I paid at the self-checkout, bagged everything, and headed out to my old silver Honda parked under the flickering light near the cart return. It was only when I got home, unpacking the bags on the kitchen counter, that I noticed the extra receipt tucked between the cereal box and the paper towels. It wasn't mine, or at least it shouldn't have been. At first, I thought maybe it had stuck to one of the plastic bags or been left behind by someone before me. But when I looked at it closely, my stomach tightened. The timestamp was just 3 minutes after my own checkout, same date, same store number, but the items listed were wrong. 1 roll duct tape, 1 pair leather gloves, 1 road map South Boise. I don't use maps, nobody does anymore. But what froze me wasn't the items themselves, it was the store ID printed beneath the barcode. My full name, Cody L. Mercer. Same as the receipt I'd just pulled from my wallet, same as my card. I laughed out loud at first, thinking maybe the machine printed a duplicate with mixed up items. But that didn't explain why someone else's purchases appeared under my payment record, or why my debit card statement already showed 2 identical transactions, one for $32.18, another for $28.41, both at the same Walmart, within minutes. I grabbed my phone and called the number on the receipt for customer service, expecting some bored night manager to sort it out. Instead, I got silence after the 3rd ring, then a slow, recorded voice saying, "This number is no longer in service." That didn't make sense. The number matched the one printed on my genuine receipt. The next day, I drove back to the store before work, receipt in hand. The manager on duty, a heavy-set woman named Paula, looked at me like I was speaking another language when I explained. "You're saying you bought something you didn't buy?" she asked. "I'm saying the system charged me for things I didn't buy," I replied, trying to keep calm. "Look, it has my name, my card ID, but not my items." She typed something into her computer, frowning. "There's no record of this second transaction. Just your first one for $32. That's it." She showed me the screen, my single purchase logged at 6:17 p.m. Nothing after. "Then how did I get this?" I asked, holding up the paper. She examined it, squinting. "Our receipts don't even print like this anymore," she said quietly. "We switched formats last summer." I stared at her, confused. "But this was yesterday." She shook her head. "The paper's older stock, we haven't used that template in almost a year." She gave a forced smile. "Probably a misprint. Happens sometimes when the paper jams." But her voice had changed. There was hesitation in it, something unconvincing. "We'll issue a refund," she added, typing again. "Just bring your bank statement when it clears." I nodded, though I could tell she just wanted me gone. As I walked away, I noticed she kept staring at the receipt, her thumb tracing the date printed across the top. I didn't realize until later that the date wasn't actually yesterday's. It was March 8th, 2006, almost exactly 1 year earlier. I couldn't let it go. That night, curiosity outweighed reason. I opened my laptop, looked up South Boise road map, and clicked images. The second picture made me freeze. It was the same cover I'd seen in the store the day before, hanging by the checkout lane. The next morning, I drove to that same Walmart again, parked in the same spot. The same flickering light buzzed overhead. I walked in, heart racing, half expecting someone to recognize me. The clerk at self-checkout was a teenage kid this time. Earbuds in, chewing gum. I asked if they'd ever had problems with duplicate transactions. All the time, he said casually. Usually when someone uses the same card twice, you gotta hit cancel first. Even if they didn't buy anything? I asked. He shrugged. Doesn't happen unless they scan something. I wandered through the aisles, pretending to browse but watching the self-checkouts from a distance. Nothing unusual, just people shopping. I almost convinced myself it was over, just a technical glitch, until I saw the same items stacked on a shelf near the back. Duct tape, gloves, and the map. The exact same ones. Except the map wasn't just any Boise map. It was the one labeled South Boise Residential and Industrial Districts. My neighborhood. I picked it up, opened it halfway, and my breath caught. Someone had circled a spot in black marker, a small block along Hawthorne Avenue. My street. That was when I felt a light tap on my shoulder. I turned. A man in a Walmart vest stood there, maybe mid-40s, face pale and expressionless. Need help finding something? He asked, voice flat. No, I was just looking, I stammered. His eyes drifted to the map in my hand, then to the duct tape beside it. That one's not for sale, he said abruptly, taking it from me. Why not? I asked. He didn't answer. He just turned, walked toward the back stockroom, and disappeared through a door marked Employees Only. I stood there for a moment, pulse pounding, before noticing another detail. I'd missed the name tag clipped to his vest. M. Stenner. I remembered it because later, when I asked the customer service desk who that was, they said no one by that name worked there. Not now, not ever. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every little sound in the house made me tense. Around 2 a.m., I heard tires crunching on gravel outside. My first thought was a delivery truck, but when I peeked through the blinds, a dark pickup sat idling at the curb. The driver's silhouette was motionless, facing my house. I waited, heart hammering, until the headlights finally flicked off and the truck pulled away. The next morning, I walked outside and found something tucked under my windshield wiper. Another Walmart receipt. This one listed only one item. Plastic sheeting, 9 feet x 12 feet. Time of purchase, 11:58 p.m. My name again. I felt sick reading it. I drove straight to the police station, handed the receipts to the desk officer, and told him everything. The double charge, the man in the vest, the truck. He took the papers, glanced over them, and sighed. You sure nobody's messing with you? Maybe a coworker? I live alone, I said. Look, someone's using my name, my card, and they know where I live. He nodded, writing something on a pad. We'll file a report, but if it's identity theft, you'll need to call your bank. I could tell by his tone he didn't believe me. Before I left, he photocopied the receipts and handed back the originals. As I walked out, I caught him murmuring to another officer, "Weird one. Format looks like the old system from that vandalism case." I didn't stop to ask what that meant. 2 days later, I checked my mailbox and found an envelope, no stamp, no sender address. Inside was a folded map, the same South Boise one, with a black X marked over a cul-de-sac at the edge of my block. Beneath it, someone had written in shaky blue ink, "You were here." I called the police again, but they said unless there was property damage or direct threats, there wasn't much they could do. I considered moving, but where would I go? Everything felt connected back to that receipt, that moment when I touched something I wasn't supposed to. I went back one last time. The Walmart looked normal, even peaceful in daylight. I asked for Paula again, but they said she'd quit 2 weeks earlier, moved out of state. I walked to the aisle where I'd found the map. It was empty now, shelves cleared. A kid stalking nearby told me they were resetting the planogram after an inventory issue. I didn't tell him what I was looking for. I just drifted toward the back stockroom where M. Stenner had gone. The door was propped open this time. Inside, rows of metal shelves stretched into dim light, filled with cardboard boxes labeled with dates and codes. I took one cautious step inside and immediately heard a footstep echo behind me. I turned, but no one was there. The temperature seemed colder in that room, the hum of the store faint through the concrete walls. My eyes landed on a small table near the far corner, receipts scattered across it like confetti. I walked closer, heart thudding, and froze when I saw what they were. Dozens of Walmart receipts, all printed with different names, but the same 3 items: duct tape, gloves, and the map. Some were yellowed with age, others fresh. And at the top of each, in faint ink, the same date, March 8, 2006. I grabbed one and realized the address on it wasn't just my neighborhood. Each map corresponded to a residential area near the store. Different streets and different people. I didn't have time to think. A shadow shifted at the far end of the aisle. "Can I help you with something?" A voice said, low, calm, deliberate. I spun around. The man with the vest was standing there, same blank expression, though now his tag was missing. "You shouldn't be back here," he said, stepping closer. "Who are you?" I asked. "Someone who keeps things in order." His gaze drifted to the receipts clutched in my hand. "Those belong to the record." "What record?" I demanded, backing away. "Purchases," he said softly. "Transactions that must be completed." I dropped the papers and ran. I didn't stop until I was outside, breath ragged, sunlight burning my eyes. When I reached my car, there was another receipt tucked under the wiper, freshly printed, still warm. "Refund processed, 1 item returned. No description, no amount. Just my name, time-stamped 9:42 a.m., the exact minute I'd walked inside." I didn't go home right away. I drove for hours, looping around the outskirts of the city, trying to convince myself this wasn't real. When I finally did get back, the house felt wrong, like something had shifted slightly out of place. My couch was angled differently, the front door unlocked. On the kitchen counter sat a folded road map, same as before, with a new X drawn just outside the city limits. Next to it, a pair of brown leather gloves. That night, I packed a bag and left Boise for good. I changed banks, got a new card, moved 2 states over. For a while, I tried to start over. I stopped checking receipts altogether, afraid of what I'd find. Then last month, while cleaning out my car, I found one wedged under the seat, faded, creased, almost unreadable. The header still visible. "Thank you for shopping at Walmart." And beneath it, a line that made my hands tremble. "Item purchased, 1 South Boise map. Buyer, Cody L. Mercer." The date? March 8, 2006. Again, I checked the mileage on my car that day. It read 142,681. I remembered that because when I bought the car 2 years ago, the dealer told me it had exactly 142,681 miles on it then, too. That was when I realized something I hadn't wanted to admit. The man in the vest hadn't been creating transactions. He'd been completing them. Every duplicate purchase, every refund, it wasn't about the items. It was about the people attached to them. Every name on those receipts was another person marked, processed, erased from the record. I still have that last receipt tucked inside my wallet. I tell myself I'll throw it away, but I never do. Sometimes I imagine someone else finding it someday, just like I did, thinking it's a mistake, calling customer service, walking into a store that doesn't remember them. And maybe that's how the next transaction starts. Story number 9. I was halfway through the checkout line when I first noticed something strange. The cashier scanned a carton of milk, and the screen flashed. Customer ID 5198-M. I didn't think much of it until the same code popped up again when she scanned the bread. I asked, "What's that number for?" She smiled politely and said, "Just for loyalty tracking, love." But I'd never signed up for any loyalty card. When I asked if one was registered under my name, she shrugged and said, "Must have been automatic." That didn't sound right. I just moved to Manchester 6 months ago. New flat, new job, knew everything after what happened with Daniel's disappearance. Nothing about my life was automatic anymore. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with my shopping receipt, the kind printed on thin paper that curls at the edges when you touch it. Under the item list, it read, Customer ID 5198M. Points balance 1042. Points. Someone had been shopping under my name for a while. I felt a pulse of unease in my chest, like a thread pulling tight. Maybe it was an error, or maybe the system recycled old IDs. But something about it just wouldn't leave my head. The next day, I went back to the Asda help desk. The manager, a broad man with an impatient tone, looked at the receipt and said, "It's probably linked to your national insurance number, miss." That's how they've started organizing these customer databases. I frowned. That can't be right. I never gave my number to Walmart or Asda. He double-checked the system, his expression changing as he scrolled. This one's tied to a Daniel H. Davies. My throat tightened. That was my husband's name. "Can I see the details?" I asked. He hesitated, then turned the screen slightly. My address was listed, our old address. The flat Daniel and I shared before he disappeared 2 years ago. I walked home on shaky legs, holding my bag too tightly. The thought spiraled. Was this some clerical mistake, or was someone using his information? I tried to rationalize it. Maybe he'd signed up before he vanished, and the system had just merged our names. But the next time I shopped, it got worse. When I scanned my first item at self-checkout, my name appeared on the screen before I even tapped anything. "Welcome back, Mrs. Davies." I froze. I hadn't entered any details. No card, no barcode. Just a loaf of bread and the machine greeting me like an old friend. The woman at the next machine noticed my reaction and asked if I was all right. I smiled weakly, said it must be a glitch, but I left my groceries right there. I didn't even take the receipt. Later that evening, I called Asda's customer support. The woman on the phone, calm and rehearsed, said, "We can't discuss loyalty profiles without verification. Do you have your customer ID number?" I gave it to her. 5198M. There was a pause. Then she said, "Mrs. Davies, this account shows as dual-linked, both profiles under the same national insurance number." My blood ran cold. "Who's the other profile?" I whispered. She hesitated. "A Daniel H. Davies. Last transaction today, 1722. I looked at the clock. It was 1730. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my breathing. "Where?" I asked, almost shouting. "Which branch?" she replied softly. "It's listed under Manchester South, your location." I hung up before she could finish. I hadn't been there today. I'd gone to the northern branch. Someone had used his name, maybe his ID, right now less than 10 minutes ago in my city. I drove straight to the south branch, my hands gripping the wheel so hard they hurt. Inside, I scanned every face. The store was busy, families with kids, tired workers, no one suspicious. I went to customer service and demanded they check the account history. The young employee looked nervous and said, "I can't access that, ma'am." I showed her. My ID, pleaded, told her my husband was missing. She called her supervisor, who agreed to pull the transaction log. There it was, same ID, same timestamp, and the purchase list: men's shaving kit, size 10 work boots, and a pack of cigarettes. Daniel's old brand. I left the store trembling. The receipts were real. The purchases recent. Either someone had stolen his identity or he was alive. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every sound outside my window made my heart jump. Around midnight, I got up to make tea. My mailbox flap rattled softly. When I opened the door, there was an envelope. No postage, just my name written in pen. Inside was a single Walmart receipt. The date was tomorrow's. The list: milk, bread, laundry detergent. My usual shopping. The total matched my average exactly. My breath hitched. I didn't go to work the next morning. I went straight to the police. They listened, nodded politely, took copies of the receipts. One officer, a middle-aged man with a patient face, asked, "Could your husband have reappeared?" I told him Daniel had been missing since 1993. No bank activity, no sightings, nothing. They said they'd look into the identity theft angle, but I could tell they thought I was overreacting. That evening, I got a call from an unknown number. When I answered, no one spoke. But I could hear background noise, a supermarket scanner beep, trolleys, faint chatter. Then a man's voice whispered, "Stop asking questions, Anna." I froze. "Who is this?" I demanded, but the line went dead. I checked the call history, no number displayed, just unknown. By the next week, things escalated. Packages started arriving at my new flat. Each addressed to me, each with receipts matching that same ID. The items were small razors, aftershave, men's gloves. I didn't open them after the first one. The gloves were identical to Daniel's old work pair, even down to the worn thumb stitching. When I called Asda again, they said the deliveries were click and collect orders redirected to my address. "You or your spouse must have confirmed the change," the rep said casually. I told her I lived alone. "Not according to our record," she replied. "It shows a joint account, both active." That night, I found muddy footprints near my doorstep. Men's size 10. I hadn't told anyone that detail. I called the police again, but they said there wasn't enough evidence of trespassing, maybe a delivery driver, maybe kids. I didn't bother arguing. I installed new locks, kept the lights on, and slept with a knife beside my bed. A few days later, I noticed the same dark blue car parked across the street every evening. Always empty, engine off. I'd look from the window and swear I saw movement in the driver's seat. But by the time I opened the blinds again, nothing. The paranoia ate at me. I couldn't tell if I was imagining it or if someone was truly watching. Then one morning, I found another receipt pushed under my door. This one wasn't printed, it was handwritten. "Return processed, customer ID 5198-M, item Anna Davies." My legs gave out and I slid to the floor, clutching it. Return processed, like I was an item being refunded. I took it straight to the police again. The same officer as before met me, glanced at it, and said, "Could be a prank, ma'am." I could see the pity in his eyes. They thought grief had made me lose it. Maybe part of me had. But I wasn't imagining the calls, the deliveries, the car. The next day, I decided to confront it myself. I went to the Manchester South branch again, right after opening. I asked for the store's data, and manager said I needed information about fraudulent transactions. The man led me to a small office near the back. He pulled up the system. I gave him the ID. "That's odd," he muttered. "This account's marked as internal." "What does that mean?" I asked. "Used by employees or system testers? Not customers." I told him that was impossible. I was the customer. He scrolled again, and his face changed. This profile was last updated by user DHD-admin. Daniel's initials. He excused himself to make a phone call, but I didn't wait. I walked straight to the employee break room area. The security door was half open. Inside, a man in a maintenance uniform was facing the vending machine. Short brown hair, broad shoulders, exactly his build. "Daniel?" I said before I could stop myself. He turned halfway, and my breath caught. It wasn't him. Similar height, similar frame, but not the same face. Still, the name tag on his chest read D. Davies. "Do I know you?" he asked, confused. I told him my husband's name was the same. He frowned. "Funny. HR said I was replacing a Daniel Davies who left in '93. My heart pounded. "Did you ever meet him?" "No, ma'am. But there's still an old locker with his name on it in the back. Been locked since before I started." He led me down a narrow hallway to a rusted locker labeled D. Davies. The key was still stuck in the lock. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside were old work boots, a crumpled uniform, and a pile of receipts. Hundreds of them, all with customer ID 5198.m, the most recent dated 2 days ago. And on the bottom shelf, an envelope with my name. Inside was a photo of me, shopping at the northern branch last week. It was taken from behind the cereal aisle. The maintenance worker backed away, pale. "This is mental," he muttered. I called the police right there, shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. When they arrived, they took everything, the receipts, the photo, even the uniform. They sealed off the locker for investigation. I waited in the parking lot, watching the sliding doors open and close, feeling like I'd stepped out of my own life. A few weeks later, the police called. They found fingerprints on the locker belonging to Daniel, my husband. Partial, aged, but enough for identification. They said it looked like he'd been accessing that locker periodically, but they couldn't say when or why the records continued after his disappearance. "Maybe someone else used his details," the officer said gently. "Maybe he's still out there." I tried to move on. I even started shopping elsewhere. But one afternoon, I got an automated message on my landline. "Hello, Mrs. Davies. Your Asda Plus account has reached platinum status. Congratulations on 20 years of loyalty." I unplugged the phone immediately. Weeks passed quietly. Then one morning, I stepped outside and saw a parcel at my door. No return address. Just a small cardboard box with my old last name Davies written neatly. Inside was a brand new customer card. The number, 5198M. I burned it that night. Still, sometimes when I'm in a shop, any shop, I'll hear a soft electronic chime as I pass a scanner. And for a second, I'll see the screen flash. "Welcome back, Mrs. Davies." It's never the same store twice, never the same city, but always the same name, always the same number. And I can't help but feel that somewhere, Daniel is still shopping, still scanning, still checking me out like I'm another item that somehow slipped through the system, waiting to be returned. Story number 10. I was halfway through my third night shift that week when the drawer popped open again. The metallic clink startled me, even though it had been happening all night. I remember freezing mid-swipe, my hand still gripping a box of cereal. The register drawer sat there wide open, like it was mocking me. No sale had been made, no button pressed. I stared at the glowing green display, the numbers still blinking from the last transaction, and for a second I wondered if I'd hit something by mistake. But I hadn't. I knew I hadn't. My manager, Dave, had already warned me twice that week. He said the drawer opening without reason could mess with the nightly count, and that I needed to pay more attention. But I was paying attention. I wasn't tired, I was alert. And still, every half hour, the drawer would spring out with that sharp metallic snick, like someone had pressed the release from the inside. I called out to the night stalkers, two guys named Ron and Alex, who worked the back aisles, but their rolling carts drowned my voice. It was close to midnight, and the only sound was the buzz of fluorescent lights and the occasional echo from the back room doors. I reached down, shut the drawer, and exhaled slowly. For the rest of the shift, I tried to ignore it, but at 12:46 a.m., it happened again. This time, right after I'd locked it for the night count. The latch popped, the drawer jolted, and coins rolled across the counter. I swear my skin prickled like static. I didn't even touch the machine. "Dave," I said the next morning, dropping the night report on his desk. "There's something wrong with Register 3. It keeps opening on its own." He looked up from his coffee with half a smirk. "It's a 30-year-old cash drawer, Marcy. It's got more screws loose than me." "I locked it," I insisted. "It opened anyway. You can check the security feed." He sighed, like he didn't want to argue. "Fine, I'll pull the—" When I came in that night, the register was still there, quiet, waiting. Dave didn't say a word when I clocked in, but around 10 p.m., he walked over with his coffee, leaned on the counter, and said, "You're right." I watched the tape. I froze. "And?" "The drawer opens," he said, "right before each transaction. Before you even touch it." For a moment, I thought he was joking. "So what, someone hacked the till? Is that even possible?" He shrugged. "It's 1983. We barely have working microwaves. But it's weird." He walked off, leaving me with a pit in my stomach. That shift, I kept staring at the register like it was breathing. I made every sale slowly, watching my own hands. But sure enough, the drawer popped each time just before I reached for it, like it knew what I was about to do. By 2 a.m., the whole store was quiet. Ron and Alex were on break, the aisles dark except for the glowing blue from the vending machines. I sat on the counter staring at that damn register. Out of impulse, I pressed "No sale." It opened with the same sharp click. I closed it again. Then I looked underneath. There was a metal latch under the drawer, an older model, rusted and cold. My fingers brushed something wedged behind it. Paper. Old, crinkled paper. I pulled it out, thinking maybe it was a lost receipt or some coupon. But it wasn't paper, it was a photograph. A Polaroid. It showed a woman standing behind a Walmart register, Register 3. Her name tag said, Linda. Her smile was small, polite, and the photo had yellowed with time. I flipped it over. In faint ink it said, "Last shift, the 4th of May, 1978. I didn't know any Linda. The store had only been open since 1978, but most of the original staff had moved on or retired. I put the photo in my pocket, unsettled but curious. The next morning, I brought it to Dave. "Do you know who this is?" He squinted. "Linda Harris. She worked here before my time, but I've heard her. Name. Disappeared one night after closing. Police never figured it out. People said she ran off to Toronto. I could tell he didn't believe that story himself. You think she—" I started. "I think you should leave that drawer alone," he said quickly. "And don't mention this to the others. People talk." That should have been the end of it, but curiosity does strange things. That night, I came early before my shift officially started and opened the register again. Nothing unusual, except when I pulled the drawer out completely, I noticed a small gap between the metal rails. Something shiny was stuck inside. I used a butter knife from the break room to pry it loose. Out came a small, tarnished key. The tag on it read, #3 register key. My breath caught. Our register keys were all plastic, modernized after 1980. This one was brass, engraved, old. I slipped it into my apron pocket. I didn't tell anyone. For a few days, nothing happened. The drawer stayed closed. I started to think the problem was over. Maybe the mechanism had just been stuck. But then, on Friday night, I found the key missing from my pocket. I searched everywhere, the counter, the floor, the break room, but it was gone. I assumed I dropped it, but when I turned back toward the register, I saw it. The drawer was open again. Inside, it sat the same brass key. I should have quit that night, but I didn't. Instead, I decided to do something stupid. I waited until closing past 2 a.m., and when everyone else had clocked out, I stayed behind, pretending I was finishing paperwork. I wanted to see if it would happen again. I turned off most of the lights, leaving only the ones above the front counter. The hum of the fluorescents filled the silence. For an hour, nothing. Then the register dinged softly, like someone had pressed a key. I stepped closer. The display lit up, 0. Then it blinked, and new numbers appeared, the 4th of May 2078. My stomach dropped. That date again, May 4, 1978. Linda? I whispered before I even realized I'd said it. The drawer opened, slow this time, almost reluctant. Inside, under the coin tray, something white glinted. I lifted the tray, my hands shaking. There, wrapped in faded plastic, was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was a time card. Name, Linda Harris. Clock out, blank. Shift, the 4th of May 2078. I stared at it so long that I didn't notice the motion near the aisle. A faint shuffling, like someone dragging their shoes. Dave? I called. My voice echoed too loud. No response. The sound grew closer, slow, deliberate steps along the linoleum. My throat tightened. I stepped back from the counter, eyes fixed on the dark edge of aisle 2. A figure moved there, barely visible in the low light. Just a silhouette. It wasn't walking straight, more like swaying, as if exhausted. "Hello?" I managed. The figure stopped. The sound of faint breathing carried across the aisles. Then I heard it, the soft jingle of coins. I turned back toward the register. The drawer had closed. Then it opened again, like someone had pressed the key. I grabbed my coat, heart pounding, and bolted to the back office. The door was locked, lights off. I fumbled for my keys, but then the intercom crackled above me, static, faint at first. Then a voice. "Linda, register 3. I froze. It wasn't my name, but the tone, it was warm, casual, like a manager paging an employee. The sound looped once more. "Linda, register 3. I forced myself to move. I ran to the front entrance, but the automatic doors didn't respond. I shoved them, they wouldn't budge. I was locked in. The register beeped again, and this time I heard coins fall, rolling onto the tiles. I turned slowly. The figure was gone from the aisle. Instead, behind the counter, something was sitting on the floor, something small, wrapped in old fabric. I couldn't stop myself. I approached, crouched down, and pulled the cloth back. Inside was a second Polaroid. The same woman, Linda, only this time her name tag was gone. She was standing in front of the back door, the one that led to the loading bay. Her eyes looked tired. I flipped the photo. Written on the back were the words, "Didn't clock out." At that exact moment, the intercom clicked again, but the voice this time wasn't paging. It was whispering, closer, like someone breathing directly into the speaker. "Behind you." I spun, but there was no one, just the hum of lights and the open drawer. I backed away slowly, shaking. My hand brushed the register counter, and that's when I felt it. The gap between the counter and the machine was warm. I leaned closer. A faint vibration ran through it, like something mechanical moving beneath the surface. I pulled the drawer completely out. Behind the slot, deep inside the cavity, something was jammed. I reached in, expecting maybe a loose part. But what I pulled out wasn't metal. It was fabric, dark, stiff, frayed, a shirt sleeve, still attached to an arm. I screamed. I dropped it and stumbled backward, hitting the candy rack. The lights above flickered. The drawer slammed shut by itself, coins rattling violently. I ran to the back, slammed the staff door open, and didn't stop until I reached the parking lot. I remember collapsing by my car, gasping for air, my hands shaking too badly to hold the keys. By the time Dave arrived, I was sitting on the curb, pale, barely speaking. I just pointed at the register. They called the police. The next day, they cordoned off the area, took the machine apart piece by piece. Beneath the counter, they found human remains wrapped in an old uniform shirt dated from the 1972. A rusted employee badge, Linda Harris. The police said she'd likely been killed after hours, her body hidden inside the register compartment during construction. The drawer's mechanism must have been damaged, reacting every time the machine was used. Every opening, every sale, it was like the register itself trying to tell us she was still there. They asked me a dozen questions, why I was there after hours, why I didn't report it sooner, but all I could say was, she wanted to clock out. The store shut down for 3 weeks after that. When it reopened, they replaced all the registers with new ones, sleek, digital, modern. But even now, whenever I hear the metallic clink of a cash drawer, my chest tightens. I can still see her name tag, the faded ink of that time card. A year later, I went back to visit Dave before I quit for good. He looked older, worn down. I asked him if they ever found out who did it. They think it was her supervisor, he said quietly. He quit the week she went missing, moved out of province, died in 1985. I nodded, not knowing what to say. Before I left, I asked him one last question. What happened to the old register? He paused. Corporate took it for evidence. But last I heard, it got sent to another branch for parts. That night, I drove home with the radio off, gripping the wheel so tight my hands ached. Because just before I left the store, as I passed the front counter, I could have sworn I heard a soft metallic snick, and when I turned, for the briefest moment, I saw Register 3's drawer half open. Story number 11. It was just supposed to be a quick stop after work. I remember rushing through the sliding doors, my hands still cold from steering the car, my head full of grocery lists. The store was nearly empty, only a few tired faces under the harsh lights. It was one of those late nights when everything feels hollow, like the world has already gone to sleep without you. I didn't plan on using the self-checkout, but all the lanes were closed except for those humming machines lined up like sentinels. I grabbed a basket of essentials, bread, milk, a few frozen dinners, and headed there, half awake, just wanting to be done. I remember the sound first, the polite beep as I scanned each item. Then came the pause. The machine's voice, smooth and calm, said, "Item not scanned." I frowned, rescanned the milk, and again it said it. "Item not scanned." I muttered, "Yeah, I got it." Chill, thinking maybe the barcode was damaged. Then the screen flickered. Just once, like a small static glitch. I bent closer to read it, and my breath caught. It wasn't the usual checkout interface anymore. For a second, just 1 second, there was an image. My son's face. His school photo, the same one that had been printed on the missing posters. I froze. My first thought was that I'd finally lost it. Sleep deprivation. Grief. Maybe this was what it looked like when your mind cracked. I blinked hard, looked again, and the normal checkout screen was back. Just the Walmart logo, cheerful and innocent. I almost laughed, told myself I'd imagined it. But my hands were shaking when I tried again. Beep. Item not scanned. Beep. Item not scanned. Every single product. The attendant, a young guy with bleached hair and tired eyes, came over. "Need help?" he asked. I hesitated, trying to find words. Yeah, it's not scanning anything. He leaned over, tapped a few buttons, then froze mid-motion. His head tilted slightly toward the screen. That's weird, he murmured. It's like your profile's already active. I asked what that meant, and he looked at me blankly. You didn't log in, right? I shook my head. He pressed cancel, but nothing happened. Then the screen blinked again, and I swear, I heard the softest sound a child's laugh. Just one tiny giggle, right from the machine's speaker. The kid looked up at me like I was pranking him. You hear that? He asked. Yeah, I said slowly. That's not, but the speakers crackled, interrupting me. The voice, the usual automated female voice, spoke again. Only this time, it wasn't calm. It was distorted, like static running through a whisper. Item not scanned, it said again, slower, drawn out. Then, quieter, find him. The attendant swore under his breath. This thing's been bugging all week, he muttered, trying to laugh it off. But he looked spooked. He rebooted the kiosk, and I stepped back, trying to steady myself. My heart was racing, but not from fear, from that wild, impossible spark of hope. Find him. The words stuck in my skull. You have to understand, my son Nathan had been missing for 11 months. He was 7 when it happened, vanished from a school parking lot in broad daylight. They never found a body, never found evidence, nothing. Just a few grainy camera frames of a blue van. I'd spent every day since clawing through theories, faces, false leads, and then suddenly, his face right there, on a checkout screen. When the machine restarted, it went back to the main menu. The kid said he'd open another lane for me, but I stayed. Something in me needed to try again. I scanned the milk, the bread. It beeped normally this time. I was almost disappointed. I paid, grabbed my bag, and was about to leave when I saw the receipt. Long, faintly smudged. At the bottom, beneath the total, a line of text printed in small, off-center letters. Come back tomorrow, 11:47 p.m. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat at my kitchen table with the receipt spread out, the letters underlined again and again with my thumb. I knew how insane it looked, but I couldn't ignore it. I went back the next night. Same Walmart, same checkout station, 11:47 sharp. There were only 2 people in the store, a janitor and a woman restocking cereal. I walked straight to the same self-checkout, my heart hammering. I scanned an empty plastic bottle just to activate the screen. Item not scanned. My mouth went dry. I whispered, Nathan? The screen flickered. A map flashed briefly, not a real map, more like a distorted GPS grid. Then text appeared. North lot. Trash bins. The image glitched, disappeared, replaced by the Walmart logo again. I turned, scanning the aisles, half expecting a manager to come yelling. But no one was there. I walked to the north exit, past the sliding doors, into the lot. The air outside bit cold against my face. The parking lot was empty except for 2 cars and the hum of a distant generator. The trash bins were lined up against the wall. I hesitated, then walked toward them. I was shaking, but not from fear, from the impossible pull of belief. I pushed open the first bin. Nothing. The second. Just cardboard. The third, something glinted inside. I reached down, hands trembling, and pulled out a small yellow plastic wristband. It was cracked, smeared with dirt, and it had Nathan's name printed in blue marker. I stumbled backward, dizzy. It was the hospital wristband he'd worn after he broke his arm at 5. I'd kept it in a memory box that went missing when he did. I dropped it, then grabbed it again, my mind racing through explanations. Prank, hallucination, coincidence. But the handwriting was mine. The next day I went to the police. They took the band, said they'd look into it, but I saw the doubt in their eyes. One detective suggested maybe I'd found it because I'd been around Walmart a lot lately. They thought grief had me chasing ghosts again, but it didn't stop. Every night that week, I got another message. Each one printed on my receipts. Thursday, check cameras. Then, he was here. Then, ask for transaction logs. The machines only did it when I was alone, never when someone else was near. I started talking to the self-checkout like it was a person. "What do you want me to see?" I whispered. Finally, on Friday, I asked the night supervisor if I could look at the old camera feeds. She said she wasn't allowed, but when I told her why, her face softened. She remembered the case. She let me into the security room. We watched footage from a week before Nathan vanished. It showed me and him shopping. He was sitting in the cart, laughing, wearing his red hoodie. I remember that night, the last normal night we had. Then the video froze mid-frame, glitched, and resumed. Only this time, Nathan was gone from the cart. In the next second, a man in a gray jacket walked past the aisle, his face obscured by motion blur. The timestamp read, 11:47 p.m. I nearly screamed. That same time, that same pattern. The woman asked if I was okay, but my mouth wouldn't work. I rewound it again and again. The man wasn't taking him on screen. He just appeared after Nathan vanished. Like the footage had been cut. I took the recording home on my phone, watched it 100 times, frame by frame. Then I noticed something new in the reflection of the freezer door behind me. A faint outline of Nathan's face. But he wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking straight at the self-checkout area. By Sunday, I was obsessed. I barely ate, barely slept. I returned again at 11:47. Same station, same machine. I scanned the cheapest thing I could find, a candy bar. Item, not scanned. Then the voice changed again. Softer this time. "He's cold," I whispered. "Where?" The screen glitched, then showed the words, "Storage 4." I ran to the back. The employee area was locked, but I banged until the same attendant from before opened it, startled. "Sir, you can't be." "Where's storage 4?" I demanded. He blinked, confused. "There's no storage 4. We only have 3. "Then what's behind the freezer section?" I asked. He frowned. "That's just an old maintenance hall, been sealed for years." I begged him to show me. Maybe it was the desperation in my voice, but he finally led me there. Behind the frozen foods section, down a narrow hallway, was a metal door half buried under pipes. It looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. He said, "There's nothing in there," but I was already pulling at the latch. It gave way with a screech. The smell hit us first, cold, damp, chemical. Inside were old pallets, moldy boxes, abandoned equipment, and in the corner, a small blue plastic bin with a Walmart logo. I walked toward it slowly. Inside were stacks of old promotional items, and on top of them, a small sneaker. Red, with a cartoon dinosaur on the side. I recognized it instantly. My knees gave out. It was Nathan's. The attendant swore softly behind me, then whispered, "Sir, look." On the wall above the bin, faint writing scratched into the metal. "Dad." Just that word. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't move. The attendant called someone on his radio, but his voice sounded far away. I reached out, traced the letters with my fingertips. It felt real. The scratches were deep, deliberate, like made by small hands. The police came that night. They sealed off the area, took the shoe, the bin, everything. They found hair fibers, traces of old tape, but no body. The investigators said it was likely a remnant of a trafficking case from years ago. I asked them how it could be linked to the machine, to the messages, but they said it was coincidence. A few weeks later, I went back one last time. Same checkout, same spot. The attendant recognized me, nodded silently. I scanned a single item, an empty bag, just to see. It beeped. The voice was normal again. Please place item in the bagging area. I sighed, ready to leave. But then, when I reached for the receipt, I saw one final line printed faintly at the bottom. Thank you, Dad. I stood there, unable to move, staring at those words until they blurred. I didn't feel fear anymore, not even sadness. Just this quiet certainty that somewhere, somehow, my son had tried to reach me, using the only thing still connected to that night. I still have that last receipt, framed above my desk. The ink has faded, but the message hasn't. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is silent, I hear the faint electronic chime of a self-checkout in my head, and every time it says, "Item not scanned," I answer softly, "I found him." Story number 12. I was halfway through loading the pallets when the temperature in the freezer dropped sharper than usual, the kind that makes your nose sting even through the balaclava. My breath clouded in front of me, hanging too long in the air, and I remember thinking the system must have overcompensated again. It was March 1989, Dundee, back when our Walmart had only been open a few months, and most of us night shift stalkers were still figuring things out. The walk-in freezer was massive, easily the size of a small house, lined with metal racks stacked high with frozen goods. We used to joke it was the only place colder than the manager's heart. I had just wheeled in another pallet of frozen vegetables when the door clanged shut behind me. That wasn't unusual, it always swung closed on its own, but this time the latch didn't click open when I tugged it. I gave it a harder pull, then both hands, leaning my shoulder into it. Nothing. The emergency release lever was stiff. I yanked it twice, but it wouldn't budge. I knocked, shouting for Pete, who was working the adjacent dairy section, but the thick insulation swallowed my voice. The only sound was the low, constant hum of the compressor. At first, I wasn't worried. We'd been trained for this. There were alarms, procedures, redundancies. But after about 15 minutes, I noticed frost creeping along the edges of the door handle on the inside. I pounded harder, shouting until my voice rasped. The metal vibrated faintly under my fists but gave no sign of movement. That's when the light above me flickered. Once, then again. I pulled my radio from my belt, thumbed the button. Static. I tried switching channels. More static. I stared at the little green LED it was on, but no signal came through. The battery shouldn't have been dead. I'd just charged it. My heartbeat quickened in that slow, controlled way you get when you're trying not to panic but your body's already decided to. I tried to keep myself busy, pacing, to stay warm. My breath looked like cigarette smoke now, thicker, heavier. The frost on the metal racks looked almost white-blue. I knew from training that hypothermia doesn't set in right away. It takes time, but that knowledge didn't help much when your fingers start to sting like you've jammed them in ice water. I slapped my gloves together and muttered, "Come on, Pete, don't screw around." Then I heard something move behind me, a soft thud, like a box sliding off a rack. I turned, scanning the rows of pallets. Nothing shifted. I told myself it was just contraction, the metal expanding and snapping from the cold. Still, I walked toward the sound, dragging my boots across the icy floor. My breath echoed too loud. That's when I noticed the frost pattern on the far wall, shaped almost like streaks from fingertips. 4 long smears, perfectly vertical. They glistened faintly, as if the ice were newer there. I ran my gloved hand across them, but they didn't feel raised or melted, just solid frost. I backed away slowly, telling myself I was tired. We'd been pulling 12-hour shifts for weeks. When you're running on caffeine and fluorescent light, you start seeing things. After what felt like an hour, I started banging again. This time, I heard a muffled voice answer back. Relief flooded me. It sounded like Pete. I shouted that the latch was jammed. He yelled something I couldn't make out, then it went quiet. 10 seconds later, the compressor stopped humming. The silence was thick, pressing against my ears. I pressed my ear to the door, hoping to hear movement outside, but there was nothing. The stillness felt wrong, almost deliberate. That's when the light flickered again, and I realized it wasn't random, it pulsed. 2 quick flashes, pause, 1 long. Then again, Morse code maybe? I didn't know Morse, but it felt too patterned to be coincidence. The faint smell of ozone hung in the air, like an electrical short. I turned toward the back wall and froze. Between the rows of pallets, about 20 feet away, I saw what looked like a person. At first, I thought it was a trick of the frost on the racks. But no, the outline was too solid. A figure standing still, facing away from me. I shouted, "Who's there?" But my voice cracked mid-sentence. The figure didn't move. I stepped closer, boots crunching softly on the ice, and the air grew colder, impossibly colder, as if I'd walked into a vacuum. The shape came into focus, a human form, frozen solid, covered in frost, wearing what looked like an old Walmart uniform, the kind we phased out years ago. It wasn't a mannequin. It couldn't be. The way the shoulders hunched forward, the bend of the knees, it looked like someone caught mid-step. The ice was so thick it gave the impression of being sculpted. My hands shook as I brushed frost from the badge. The nameplate was illegible, the letters corroded under a thick layer of ice. I stumbled back, muttering, "No, no," over and over, because the air smelled faintly of old plastic, and something else, something metallic. I ran to the door again and hit the alarm button. Nothing happened. My gloves left wet smears on the red plastic. I pounded on the steel until my knuckles hurt. I shouted until my throat burned. That's when I heard the second noise, another dull thud, farther down the aisle. Then another, closer. I turned just in time to see another frozen figure leaning slightly out from behind a stack of boxes. This one was smaller, maybe a woman. Her posture was unnatural, twisted slightly, as if she'd tried to turn around before freezing. Frost had gathered thickly around her hair, turning it white. Her mouth was half open, lips split from the cold. The silence felt alive now, like the freezer itself was listening. I stumbled backward, slipping on the frost, my boot catching a ridge in the floor. My radio fell, clattering beside a box of frozen meat. The impact must have jolted it, because static crackled, then a faint voice. "You okay in there?" I scrambled for it, pressing the button so hard it nearly cracked. "Pete, door's jammed. There's something..." The line went dead. A new sound filled the silence, a faint whirring, mechanical, from the ceiling vents. Cold mist began to pour down like dry fog, obscuring the racks. My vision blurred from the vapor and panic. I moved toward the door again, but the frost had grown thicker, coating it in a crystalline shell. My reflection looked pale and distorted in the metal. I hit the lever one last time, and it snapped off clean in my hand. My breathing quickened, clouding the air so thick I could hardly see. I crouched, trying to conserve warmth, but something glinted near the floor. Another name tag, half buried in frost. The letters were faint, but I could make them out this time. K. Henderson. I froze, no pun intended, because that was the name of the assistant manager who'd gone missing 6 years ago, before I even worked there. People said he'd quit overnight, left no note. I stared at the tag, my mind spinning. It wasn't possible. But then I remembered what one of the old-timers had told me during orientation. That freezer's older than the building. They built around it. Used to be part of a storage facility before Walmart bought the site. I had laughed it off at the time, but now it didn't feel so funny. I tried thinking logically. There had to be an explanation. Maybe these were mannequins from some old promotion. Maybe a prank, an art project, something. But deep down I knew. The uniforms weren't replicas, they were the real, outdated ones. My legs were numb. I pressed my hands under my armpits for warmth, rocking slightly. Then came the third sound, faint scraping, like ice shifting under weight. I looked up. The figure I'd first seen was gone. I scanned the racks, heart hammering. The frost coated. The shapes had shifted positions. One was closer to me now, its head tilted slightly downward. I backed against the door, my gloves squeaking on the metal. I don't remember screaming, but my throat hurt afterward, so maybe I did. Then finally the door shuttered. I spun around, yanking it open as light from the loading dock spilled in. Pete stood there with two mechanics, both staring at me wide-eyed. The air that rushed out carried a bitter chill that made them flinch. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping. "Jesus Christ," Pete muttered. "You've been in there 4 hours." I collapsed onto a crate. My fingers were blue. Someone wrapped me in a thermal blanket, while the mechanics went inside to check the door. I watched them from the hallway as they entered. They stayed inside maybe 5 minutes before one came out pale as milk. He whispered something to the store manager, who turned toward me slowly, face drained of color. "There's mannequins in there," he said quietly. "Frozen solid. You didn't put those there?" I shook my head. He looked at me like he didn't believe me. The police came within the hour, sealed off the area. They worked all night. By morning, they'd pulled out 4 frost-covered human-shaped forms, each wearing Walmart uniforms from a store that had closed years earlier in Fife, about 60 miles north. The local paper ran a short piece, calling it historical materials recovered from an earlier structure. But those of us who worked there knew better. They shut down the freezer for good, rebuilt the back wall. The company said it was for safety compliance. We all signed non-disclosure forms a week later. The police never released any names publicly, but I overheard one of the officers say something about identifiable badges. A month later, I went back for my final paycheck. The new manager was kind but nervous, avoiding eye contact. As I was leaving, I passed by the sealed wall where the freezer used to be. Someone had scratched faint lines into the fresh paint, 4 parallel streaks, like fingers dragging through frost. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that same mechanical hum in my head, the one that started before the mist came down. I tried to convince myself it was just trauma replaying. But 2 days later, Pete called. He said they'd reopened part of the freezer for inspection. When the crew went in, the frost had returned, covering everything, even though the power was disconnected. He said there were new patterns on the ice this time, 5 smears, like someone else had joined them. I told him not to call me again. I quit that day, burned my uniform, and moved south. I haven't worked in cold storage since, but sometimes, in supermarkets or walk-ins, when that compressor hum kicks in just right, I swear I can still smell that metallic air. And in my dreams, when I see my breath fog up, I always count the shapes that appear in it. If there's more than one, I wake up immediately. Because I know they're still there waiting, frozen in the dark, behind some wall that no one should ever open again. Story number 13. I was halfway through my first night shift when I realized I wasn't the only one cleaning the store. It was a Thursday, mid-July of 2011, my 3rd week working nights at the Walmart in Hamilton. The pay wasn't great, but it was quiet work, which suited me fine. I'd mop the floors, restock paper towels, polish the glass doors, simple things. But that night, I kept hearing the squeak of another mop echoing down the aisles. At first, I thought it was just the sound bouncing back from the far end, but it was too distinct, too steady. When I turned the corner into the home goods section, the The sound stopped. No one there. Just the faint smell of bleach and a fresh, wet shine on the floor I hadn't cleaned yet. I called out softly, "Dave? You around?" Dave was the other janitor on duty, but he was clocked out early that night. His kid had the flu. I knew that because he'd spent half the shift complaining about it. My voice carried a bit, but no answer came. The PA system was off, the checkout counters were dark, and the overnight stalkers were on break. It was just me and that quiet hum of the ventilation above. I remember the air felt too cold then, like the AC had kicked in full blast even though the system was set to low for the night. My shoes squeaked against the damp tiles as I walked back toward the janitor's closet. That's when I noticed something that didn't belong. 3 blue bins stacked by the produce section. They weren't ours. No Walmart logo, no barcode, no label. Just solid gray plastic with faded tape and a faint chemical smell leaking out. I figured they belonged to maintenance, maybe left by day shift, so I grabbed one edge to move them. It was heavy, like it was filled with liquid or sand. But when I tilted it slightly, something inside slid and made a dull thud, not a splash. I crouched down to check the lid, but it was zip-tied shut. That's when I heard the rolling of another cart. A slow, rhythmic wheel. Noise coming from the frozen foods section. I stood up straight and called out again, "Hey, who's there?" This time, I caught sight of movement. Someone in a high-visibility vest, pushing a cart stacked with cleaning supplies. Except the vest wasn't the kind we used, it was the old yellow type, the ones Walmart phased out years ago. I waved. The figure didn't react. They just pushed the cart down the aisle and turned the corner. I jogged after them, cutting across the middle aisle to intercept. When I turned that same corner, the person was gone. The cart too, but the floor had fresh mop streaks leading straight to the fire exit, one that was alarmed and always locked at night. I reached for the handle and checked. Locked, just like always. No footprints, no door alarm. I stood there for a second, feeling stupid for even thinking I'd seen someone, but the mop streaks were still wet. My rational brain tried to explain it. Maybe someone was helping overnight, maybe a new contractor, but we'd had no outside staff for weeks. I decided to check the security office. I wasn't authorized, but the supervisor, Jerome, left the monitor feed open sometimes. He was outside having a smoke. I peeked in and tapped the keyboard to wake the screen. The camera for aisle 12, the one leading to the fire exit, showed nothing but static. I clicked back 10 minutes. The feed played clearly until the exact moment I'd seen the person, then static again. When it cleared, the mop streaks were already there. I froze, staring at the screen. It wasn't fear yet, just a deep unease. I backed out of the office and told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the cameras glitched. Maybe another worker was on an undocumented task. Still, I decided to keep my phone recording, just in case. Around 3 a.m., I was in the paper goods aisle, restocking toilet rolls, when I heard voices. Low, calm, and rhythmic, like a group quietly talking among themselves. I turned off my music to listen. The sound came from the back hallway near the stockroom. I thought maybe the restockers were back early, so I walked toward it. As I got closer, I caught the distinct scrape of metal on tile and the squeal of a cleaning cart wheel. My skin prickled. That wasn't the restock team, they never used carts like that. I peered around the corner and saw 4 people in mismatched uniforms. One in an old green Walmart vest, one in a faded red one, another wearing a janitor's polo from a store that didn't even exist anymore. They moved in perfect sync, sweeping, mopping, dusting, but their faces were down, hair covering their eyes. None of them spoke, but I could still hear the murmur, low and constant, like a chant beneath their breath. I should have backed away, but curiosity pinned me. I stepped forward slowly, gripping my mop handle like a bat. The nearest one stopped mopping and turned their head toward me, slow, mechanical. Their name tag was blank, but the shirt was soaked, like they'd been standing in water. "Hey," I said, trying to sound calm. "You guys from maintenance or something?" The figure didn't answer, just turned back to the mop bucket and dipped it again. The water inside looked black. I swallowed hard and backed off, deciding I'd had enough weirdness for one night. I turned down the opposite hallway, grabbed my phone, and texted Jerome, "Hey, who else is on shift? I think someone's inside." No reply. When I looked up, all four of them were standing at the end of the hallway, blocking the way back to the main floor. Just standing there, heads tilted, motionless. I froze. The silence felt thick, heavier than before. Then, as suddenly as they appeared, the fluorescent lights above flickered, and they were gone. No footsteps, no sound of carts rolling away, just gone. I ran. Straight to the janitor's closet, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking so badly that I dropped my phone twice trying to call Jerome. No answer. I tried the store's internal line, still nothing. The hum of the lights above the closet buzzed unevenly, like something was interfering with the power. I sat there on the floor for maybe 20 minutes, heart pounding, trying to convince myself I was just overtired. The night shifts were long. Maybe I'd dozed off and dreamed it standing up. But then my radio crackled. The one clipped to my belt, the one only staff could access. A distorted voice whispered, "Aisle 13 needs cleaning." I froze. That was the standard call format, but no one was in the control booth. "Who is this?" I said. No answer. Just static. Then again, "Aisle 13. I stood up slowly, took a breath, and stepped back out. The hallway was empty. I made my way toward aisle 13, feeling my stomach twist with every step. When I got there, the first thing I noticed was the smell. Strong, metallic, sharp. I lifted my flashlight. The floor was smeared with something dark, in streaks leading toward the back. For a moment, I thought it was just spilled cleaning fluid, but when I knelt closer, I knew it wasn't. It was blood-thin, partially dried, dragged across the tiles. I followed it a few feet before I stopped. There, half hidden behind a stack of paper towel boxes, lay a broken ID badge. I picked it up and wiped the dust off. The name was barely legible, faded and water-warped. Ronald Pierce, custodial staff. The issue date was 2002. My throat tightened. The store wasn't even built until 2008. I backed away slowly, heart hammering. My mind was racing for a rational answer. Maybe it was from the old site, maybe transferred stock, but the badge looked like it had been lying there for years. I turned around to leave, and that's when I saw them again. All four, standing by the far end of the aisle, staring straight at me. This time, their faces were visible, pale, sunken and wet. The one in front, a man with deep lines across his cheeks, spoke in a low, steady voice. "It's your turn." My legs felt locked. "Your shift," he said again, stepping forward. "You're late." I bolted. I ran straight down the aisle, slipping on the wet floor, crashing into a display of detergent. The lights above flickered violently, and every bulb along the ceiling popped one by one as I passed beneath them. I didn't look back until I reached the front doors. When I did, they were gone, not even footprints left behind. I panted, leaning on my knees, half laughing from nerves, half crying. Jerome finally came through the front entrance, looking confused. "You okay, man? I was on break." I told him what I saw. He frowned, clearly not believing me, but trying to sound polite. "Maybe someone from corporate's running an after-hours audit," he said. "You know how they do weird stuff." But when I led him back to aisle 13, the blood was gone. The badge, too. The floor looked spotless. Jerome just shrugged. "You need sleep, bro." He left it at that. I didn't sleep that morning. I stayed up searching online for Ronald Pierce Walmart Hamilton. Nothing came up, but when I asked one of the older clerks the next day, she paused. "Ron Pierce? Yeah, he used to work here. Back when it was the old warehouse on Killarney Street. Died in an accident before they rebuilt the site." I asked what kind of accident. She hesitated, lowering her voice. "Freezer unit collapse. Overnight, crew got trapped. 4 of them. They were janitors, I think. My skin went cold. 4. That night, I didn't want to go back, but I needed the job. Bills don't wait for ghosts. I showed up, keeping my head down, headphones on, sticking to my assigned zones. Everything was quiet until around 2:30. The radio buzzed again. Aisle 13. My stomach sank. I didn't answer. I turned the volume all the way down, ignored it, and kept mopping. But then the store's PA, dead for months, crackled overhead. A whispering voice repeated, "Aisle 13, your shift is not done." I dropped my mop and walked straight out the front door, didn't even clock out. 2 days later I quit. The manager didn't ask why. Maybe he already knew. Before leaving though, curiosity got the better of me. I went back one last time, in daylight, just to grab my last check. The morning crew was busy, laughing, chatting, like everything was normal. I walked past aisle 13 out of pure stubbornness. The floor was polished, shining like a mirror. Someone had placed 4 new gray bins along the wall, identical to the ones I'd seen that night, zip-tied shut. A small sticker on each lid read, "Maintenance, do not move." As I walked past, one of the bins shifted slightly, like something inside had just settled. I don't tell this story much. It sounds too strange, and people assume I imagined it all. Maybe I did, but sometimes, late at night, when I drive past that Walmart, I still see the faint glow through the front windows. If you look closely, you can spot movement inside, figures, pushing carts, wiping glass, mopping tiles. But the store's been closed for renovation since 2013. And every time I see those faint silhouettes cleaning under the flickering lights, I can still hear that calm, mechanical voice whispering through the static. Aisle 13 needs cleaning. Story number 14. I was halfway through my second cup of instant coffee when the call came through on the radio. Security. 2. You seeing this? My partner, Jerome, sounded uneasy. He wasn't the kind of guy to spook easily, and the way his voice cracked made my stomach tighten. It was just after 2 in the morning, the dead stretch of my night shift at the Walmart in Durban North, the kind of hours when time drips instead of moves. I pressed the talk button. "Seeing what?" I asked, staring at the monitor wall filled with dull, black and white feeds from every corner of the store. "Front entrance," Jerome replied. "Check camera 1. I shifted my chair closer and tapped the keyboard. The main glass doors filled the screen, locked and dark like always. But then I saw him, a man inside, pounding both fists against the doors, like he was desperate to get out. He was older, maybe in his 40s, wearing a dark windbreaker and jeans, his mouth moving like he was shouting something I couldn't hear. My first thought was that someone had been left inside when we closed, but I'd done the sweep myself an hour ago. No customers, no staff, nothing. How the hell did he get in? I muttered, leaning forward. Jerome's voice came back, low and tense. "That's what I'm trying to figure out, man." I grabbed my flashlight and started walking. The corridors behind the main floor were too quiet, just the hum of ceiling lights and the buzz of the soda fridge from the break room. My boots echoed against the concrete as I keyed open the side door that led to the main store. The air out there always smelled like a mix of plastic wrap and cleaning detergent. I could see the front entrance from the far end of the electronics section. The man was still there, slamming the door, his face red and frantic. I raised the radio again. "Jerome, stay in the office. If I lose sight of him, I need eyes on." "Copy that," he said. As I got closer, I noticed something strange. His reflection wasn't right. The glass doors showed him moving, but in the reflection from the glossy floor tiles, his movements were delayed, like a bad video feed trying to catch up. I slowed down without realizing it, my fingers tightening around the flashlight. "Sir," I called out, "store's closed. You need to step back from the door." He turned his head toward me so fast it looked unnatural. For a moment, I thought he'd recognized me. His eyes locked onto mine, and his lips formed the words, "Help me." But there was no sound. I broke into a jog. The keycard reader on the door blinked red, meaning it was locked. The man banged harder, pressing his palms flat against the glass. Then suddenly he stopped, just froze there, like someone had hit pause on him. I shouted again, "Sir, I need you to move back." Nothing. His hands were still on the glass, eyes wide open, mouth half open mid-word. The air felt heavy, too still, like the store had forgotten how to breathe. I turned my radio back on. "Jerome, you still seeing this?" Static hissed. Then his voice came through, but soft, hesitant. "Bro, there's no one there." I stared at the man in front of me. "What do you mean?" I snapped. "I'm looking right at him." "I'm telling you," Jerome said. "Camera one's clear. You're standing at the door alone." I stepped back, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was shaking my ribs. I looked again, blinking, trying to make sense of it. But he was still there. Same clothes, same desperate look, still frozen mid-motion. I turned away for half a second to check my radio connection, and when I looked back, he was gone. Just gone. Not walked away, not faded, gone, like he'd never been there at all. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, pale and wide-eyed. Jerome met me halfway across the floor. "You look like you saw a ghost," he said, trying to laugh it off, but his voice was tight. "Show me the feed," I said. We went straight to the security office. I replayed the footage from camera 1. The timestamp matched exactly, 2:11 a.m. I watched myself walk toward the door, flashlight in hand, but there was no man, just empty space. No banging, no movement, nothing but me, shouting at thin air. Jerome leaned back in his chair, rubbing his face. "Maybe you're tired," he said. "You've been doing doubles all week." I didn't respond. I just kept staring at the screen. Something about the door looked off. The reflection in the glass, faint but clear, showed both of us standing there now, not just me. Only in the reflection, there was a third shape between us. Faint, blurred, but shaped like a man. I turned off the monitor. "I'm doing another sweep," I said. Jerome grabbed my arm. "No, man. Let's wait for morning. Call the manager." "And tell her what?" I shot back. "That I saw a ghost in aisle 3? She'll laugh us out of the job." I left before he could argue. The store aisles felt longer than usual. My flashlight beam jumped from rack to rack, bouncing off the shiny packaging of everything that would look harmless by daylight. I checked the restrooms, the staff hallway, even the loading dock empty. But as I stepped into the break room, I felt the air was colder. The lights above flickered once, then steadied. On the table was a coffee cup, not mine. Someone had taken a sip recently. The rim was still damp. "Jerome," I whispered into the radio. "Did you leave a cup here?" No answer. I tried again. Still nothing. That's when I noticed a faint noise coming from the hallway, a rhythmic, hollow thudding, like someone knocking on a metal door, slow and steady. I followed the sound until it led me to the maintenance hallway near the back. The door to the generator room was slightly open, which it shouldn't have been. I pushed it open, shining my light inside, The smell hit me first, a mix of dust and cold steel. Then I saw the old metal door leading to the storage basement. No one used that area anymore. It had been sealed off after a renovation years ago. But the knocking was coming from behind it. "Hello?" I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. The knocking stopped. For a few seconds, there was silence. Then, from the other side of the door, a voice spoke, muffled but clear. "Please, let me out." I froze. It was the same voice I'd heard in my head at the front door. The same desperate tone. I took a step back. "Who's in there?" I demanded. No answer. Then, faintly, "You left me inside." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible," I whispered. I checked the door, heavy, sealed with a rusted padlock. I turned to leave, but the padlock snapped open by itself, clanging onto the floor. I nearly dropped my flashlight. The door creaked open slowly, revealing a staircase that disappeared into darkness. The air from below smelled old, like damp concrete and something sour underneath it. I should have called for help. I should have walked away. But something in that voice, that pleading, human sound, made me step forward. Each step echoed, like I was walking into someone's memory. The basement was small, filled with unused equipment and boxes covered in cobwebs. My flashlight beam caught something on the far wall, a handprint, fresh, pressed into the dust. Then another, and another, leading to the center of the room, where a single folding chair stood, facing a blank section of wall. On it sat a Walmart vest, faded blue, with a name tag that read, "Daniel." I felt something brush the back of my neck, like static. I spun around, shining the light everywhere. Nothing. Then I looked back at the vest. It was gone. My heart raced. I turned to run, but the staircase wasn't there anymore. The wall had closed up, a smooth concrete where the opening had been. Panic hit me like a wave. I started pounding on the wall. "Jerome!" I shouted. "I'm in the basement." My voice echoed back at me, warped, like someone else was repeating it out of sync. Then I heard footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching behind me. "Who's there?" I yelled, but the footsteps kept coming. The air grew thick, pressing against my chest. I swung the flashlight around and saw him, the same man from the front entrance, standing in the corner. His face was pale, lips cracked, eyes sunken like he hadn't slept in years. He lifted a trembling hand and pointed at me. "You're late," he said softly. I stumbled backward. "What do you want from me?" He stepped closer, the sound of his shoes scraping against the floor like sandpaper. "You left the doors open," he whispered. "Now I can't leave." His eyes flicked toward the ceiling, and for the first time, I noticed a small square of flickering light above us, the faint glow of a camera lens. I realized then that this room wasn't sealed at all. It was still connected to the security system, and I understood what he meant. He wasn't talking about the doors outside. He was talking about the ones in the store's network, the feeds, the recordings. I ran toward the wall again, slamming my fists against it, desperate for any way out. The man didn't move, he just watched me. "You let me in," he said. "Now you'll see what I saw." And then, everything went black. When I came to, Jerome was shaking me awake on the main floor. Hey, wake up," he said, panicked. I blinked hard. I was lying by the front doors. My flashlight was cracked beside me, and my hands were filthy, covered in dust. "What the hell happened?" Jerome demanded. I sat up, disoriented. "The basement," I stammered. "There's someone." "Basement?" he interrupted. "We don't have a basement. They filled it years ago, remember?" I tried to stand, but my legs were weak. "You don't understand," I said. "I saw him. He said he was locked inside." Jerome stared at me for a long moment, then sighed. "You've been out cold for half an hour." I found you lying here, hitting the door like you were trying to get in. I looked past him, toward the cameras above the entrance. The red light was still blinking, recording. Check the footage, I said. He hesitated but nodded. We went back to the office. The footage showed exactly what he said, me pounding on the glass from the inside, shouting silently into the night. But outside, another figure stood watching me, a man in a dark windbreaker, identical to me. The feed cut out right after. A week later, I quit. Couldn't stand the thought of going back into that store. But sometimes, late at night, when I pass by it on the way home, I see something that makes my chest tighten. The front doors still have handprints on the glass. 2 sets, one large, one smaller. Every time they clean them, they come back within a day. I don't know if he ever left, or if I ever really did. All I know is that the cameras never lie, except, sometimes, when they do. Story number 15. It started with something so ordinary, I almost didn't notice a receipt, slightly crumpled, tucked into my wallet after a quick trip to Walmart. I had gone in for toothpaste and batteries, nothing more. I remember the smell of floor cleaner mixing with warm air from the vents near the checkout lanes. The cashier, a young man with curly hair, didn't look up once. He handed me the receipt, said, "Have a nice day," and I walked out thinking about dinner. But that night, sitting at the kitchen table in my flat in Cork, I noticed something strange. The bottom of the receipt listed not just my purchase, but a line of extra text beneath the total. 8/9, 1942, checkout complete. Then another, 9/9, 14. 17, service disruption. Then another after that. There were 5 lines in total. The last one said, 12/9, 22/11, final sale. I thought it was a glitch or some automated print error. Still, it bothered me. I kept looking at the words, final sale, like they didn't belong on something so mundane. The next day, on the 8th of September, I forgot all about it until 7:42 that evening, when I was crossing the street outside the post office. A van sped through a puddle and splashed me head to toe. I laughed at the timing. It was exactly 1942, like the receipt said. A coincidence, I told myself. But later, when I took the soggy paper from my purse to check, the ink from that line had faded slightly, just that one. I remember feeling a little cold in my stomach. The following day, the 9th, I worked my shift at the small travel agency on Oliver Plunkett Street. At 2:17 p.m., our computers crashed. Every single one. The boss called it a service disruption. The receipt's second line read that exact phrase. When I went home that evening, I sat in my kitchen, holding the paper under the light. The first 2 entries had turned faint gray. The rest were still bold black to dear. My heart was beating faster than I like to admit. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was some kind of promotional Easter egg. Companies did strange things to seem clever. I told my friend Deirdre about it over the phone, and she laughed. "You're letting your imagination run wild, Maeve. It's a bloody receipt." I agreed, but something in my gut wouldn't rest. The next entry said, 10/9, 11/4, customer assistance. That Friday morning, I stopped by the same Walmart again, determined to prove to myself that it meant nothing. Inside, I went to the same register, but the curly-haired cashier wasn't there. Instead, an older woman with kind eyes scanned my basket of items. When I looked at her name tag, it said Ane. I smiled, distracted, and didn't notice that one of my bags tore as I walked out. A bottle of dish soap fell, rolling across the pavement. I bent down to grab it, but my heel caught on the curb, and I went down hard. Ane rushed out from her register shouting, "Are you all right, love?" and helped me up. My knee was scraped, bleeding lightly. She handed me tissues and fussed over me. And right then, my watch read 11/4. My hands shook as I took the old receipt from my wallet. The third line, customer assistance, was now smudged beyond recognition. I stared at it like it might dissolve completely. When I got home, I taped it to my fridge, as if keeping it in sight could stop whatever came next. The fourth line read, 11/9, 1829, lost item. Saturday came, and I was hyper-aware of the time all day. I went shopping early, avoided the roads, tried to stay in control. Around 6 p.m., I was cooking dinner, chicken curry, and reached for the spice rack. My grandmother's gold locket, which always hung around my neck, wasn't there. I hadn't taken it off in years. I turned the flat upside down, searching everywhere. The kitchen counter, the sink, the bathroom. It was gone. When I finally gave up, the clock read 1829. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that final line on the receipt. Final sale. The words had started to fade into a sickly yellow, like old newspaper print. My heart thudded every time I looked at it. I didn't know what it meant. Was it predicting? Warning me? I started to think I was losing my mind. On Sunday morning, I decided to go back to the store. I wanted answers, or at least to see the cashier again. The Walmart was quieter than usual. The air felt stale, heavy. I walked to the service desk, the receipt folded carefully in my hand. The woman behind the counter frowned when I explained. "You got a strange printout, you said?" she asked. I handed it to her, and she squinted at it. This looks like a system timestamp log. Maybe you caught a corrupted print. It happens." She shrugged, but her voice lacked conviction. I noticed her hands tremble slightly as she handed it back. "Best toss it away, love," she added. I didn't. I couldn't. On my way out, I spotted the curly-haired cashier at another lane. He looked tired, his eyes dark, but when I approached, he straightened. "You printed this for me," I said quietly, showing him the receipt. He stared at it for a long time, then whispered, "I didn't. That printer's been offline for months. They're replacing it." My stomach dropped. I watched him walk away, and for a second, I thought I heard him mutter something like, "Not again." The 12th arrived like a shadow. I woke up early, tense, checking the clock every few minutes. The last entry read, 22/11, final sale. I didn't know what to do with that information except dread it. I called Deirdre again, told her everything. She said I needed sleep, that coincidences could snowball when you focus too hard on them. I almost believed her until she asked, "What time is it now?" When I told her it was 6:45 p.m., the line went dead. I called back, but it went straight to voicemail. The hours dragged. I sat by the window, the receipt on the table, my hands cold. Around 9:30, the lights flickered once, twice, a power dip. I tried to distract myself by washing dishes, then drying them one by one, but my focus kept slipping. At 10 p.m., I made tea. My reflection in the kettle looked pale and drawn. When I sat down, I noticed something under the fridge magnet, my grandmother's gold locket. I stared, confused. I could have sworn I'd searched there. The sight of it should have comforted me, but it didn't. It felt staged, like something placed back where it shouldn't be. By 10:10, I was pacing. Every sound made me jump: the hum of the fridge, the ticking clock, the pipes groaning. I wanted to believe nothing would happen, that 22:11 would pass like any other minute. At exactly 22:11, there was a sharp knock on my door. 3 times, fast. My heart seized. I froze, staring at the wood. The peephole showed nothing, just the dim hallway light flickering. I waited, not breathing. Then came the sound of paper sliding under the door. I crouched down, hand trembling, and picked it up. It was another Walmart receipt, crisper, newer. It listed one line, 13/9/83, refund processed. I stared at it for so long my eyes burned. Refund processed. What did that mean? My brain tried to rationalize. Maybe a prank, maybe someone copying my previous receipt, but who would know those dates? Who would go this far? I didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, I went straight to the store. I don't even remember getting dressed. The parking lot was half empty, the sky overcast. When I walked in, I didn't see the curly-haired cashier or Ine. The manager on duty, a man with a thick accent, listened as I explained everything, the first receipt, the timings, the paper under my door. He looked skeptical but curious. "Do you have it with you?" he asked. I handed him both. He disappeared into the back room and didn't return for almost 15 minutes. When he came back, his expression had changed, pale, tight around the mouth. "Miss, these serial numbers, they're from 2 different stores. One closed in 1991. I blinked. "That's impossible. I got them this week." He just shook his head. This location wasn't even built then. My legs went weak. I left before he could say more. On the bus ride home, the city blurred past the windows. I felt like I was fading along with it. When I reached my flat, there was a voicemail from Deirdre. Her voice sounded shaky. "Maeve, I found something weird. You need to call me back." I did, immediately, but the number said disconnected. I checked my call log twice. Same result. That's when I noticed something on my kitchen table. The first receipt was gone. In its place was a new one, creased, slightly damp. It read, 13/9/83, refund processed. Same as the one slid under my door. But below it now, a new line appeared. 14/9/21/56, replacement issued. That phrase, replacement issued, made my mouth go dry. Replacement for what? Or who? The next morning, I woke up to a chill in the air. My reflection in the mirror looked slightly off. Tired, yes, but different somehow. I tried to call my workplace to say I'd be late, but the line rang and rang. When I arrived at the office, the receptionist frowned. "Can I help you?" she said. I smiled awkwardly. "It's Maeve. I work here." Her face went blank. "Sorry, love. There's no one by that name here." I left in confusion, heart pounding. I checked my ID card. It looked the same, except the photo was wrong, slightly younger, a version of me from years ago. My stomach churned. I ran home, my thoughts spiraling. The receipts were lined on the counter now, side by side, their print still fading. Every time I blinked, I swore the text rearranged itself. Final sale. Refund processed. Replacement issued. I sat down and started writing everything that had happened, trying to make sense of it, like documenting a sequence would anchor me to reality. Around 9:30 that evening, someone knocked again, softer this time. I didn't open it. I couldn't. My phone buzzed a minute later, a text from an unknown number. It read, "Exchange completed. Thank you for your purchase." That was 3 years ago. I've moved since then, different town, different name. I avoid supermarkets when I can. I pay in cash and never take the receipt. But sometimes, when I open my wallet, I find one folded neatly inside, no matter how many I throw away. Always the same store ID, always dated the next day. And though I don't dare read them anymore, I can still feel the ink against my fingertips, still fresh, as if waiting for me to unfold it and find out what comes next. Hey everyone, thanks for listening. If you stuck around until the end, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. As always, I'm looking for more story ideas, so drop a comment below with any themes or experiences you'd like to hear next. Stay safe out there, and until next time, keep your eyes open.